Good afternoon / good morning. I am Steve Lookner. We are here from the Right Side Broadcasting Studios in Auburn, Alabama. This is the pre-show for the Sean Spicer press briefing today. Today, Sean Spicer is back. Sarah Sanders had said earlier in the week that she was going to be doing it all week, but Sean Spicer is back from his Navy Reserve duty today. He will be doing the press briefing. It should be another quite interesting one today. Maybe contentious. We'll see. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So, I think probably, I should say, we'll talk about in the pre-show the different questions that Sean Spicer might be asked today and different topics he might be asked about. We'd love to get your comments and feedback on what's going on. If you have any comments or questions on the issues of the day, on things that Sean Spicer might be asked about, on issues the president is facing right now, if you have any comments or questions on that, write to me at Lookner on Twitter, at Lookner, or email me, steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. I'll read your comment on the air. Hello to everybody watching on Facebook, by the way, and YouTube, where we usually are as well. So let's start by talking about some of the stuff Sean Spicer is going to be asked about today. And I think you will see a lot of questions, perhaps more than you want to see, about the President Trump interview with Lester Holt last night and the President Trump's tweets this morning. So one part of the interview with Lester Holt, yesterday's interview with Lester Holt that ran last night, well, I guess it ran, they released clips of it in the afternoon. But one part of that I'm sure will be asked about was when President Trump talked about the firing of James Comey, and he said, I'm trying to get the exact wording. The basic thing he said, I'll look it up here in a second. The basic thing he said was that he was going to fire Comey even before he got the letters from Sessions, Attorney General Sessions, and Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein explaining why they thought Comey wasn't doing a good job. And also, so there's that part, and also he said that he seemed to imply that the decision to fire Comey was based in some sense on President Trump being unhappy about the Russia investigation because he felt like it was a fake story and that there was no real there and that there was no collusion, yet this investigation was going on. Although if you look at how he actually said it, it's not, he didn't say it explicitly that way, but it's being interpreted that way, and it certainly could be interpreted that way. So that seemed to, that account of why he fired Comey, that he was going to fire Comey anyway, regardless of the letters from the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General, and that the Russia investigation played some role in firing Comey. That seemed to go against the administration's position on the first day, which is, and I'm just giving, you will hear these questions asked, so I'm laying out the case that's going to be made by the press, I'm sure. That seemed to go against the administration's position on the first day, that after the Comey firing, where they said the firing, and the night of the Comey firing, where they said the firing was because of the recommendation by the Deputy Attorney General and the Attorney General, and because of the reasons stated in their letters. So you're going to hear a bunch of questions today of the forum. Why was he fired? You said he was fired because of this, but now it's in the interview President Trump said this. So get ready for all those questions, and there will be a ton of them. I guarantee you that. Let me just see if I can find that place in the interview. Trump, and then we're going to get to Trump's tweets, President Trump's tweets. We'll show you some of those. But, sorry. Trump Holt interview transcript. I know it's there because I was reading it this morning. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I think I have it. If it loads. There we go. Let's see if I can find the part about Russia. Well, I don't think you want to see me scrolling through all this. That won't be fun. Let me take one quick look and see if I can find it here. Okay, here it is. Lester Holt says, Monday you met with the Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Donald Trump, right. Lester Holt, did you ask for a recommendation? Donald Trump, what I did is I was going to fire Comey. My decision, it was not. Lester Holt, you had made the decision before they came in the room? President Trump, I was going to fire Comey. There's no good time to do it, by the way. They were, and Lester Holt, because your letter you said I accepted their recommendation, so you had already made the decision. Donald Trump, I was going to fire regardless of their recommendation. So that part seems to contradict the story told on the first night of the firing and some on the first day, I believe, as well after, and then the other thing that's going to be asked about is, if I can find it. Yeah, here's the other part that I believe is going to be focused on in the press briefing. President Trump says, he made a recommendation. He's highly respected, very good guy, very smart guy. The Democrats like him. This is Rosenstein, by the way. The Republicans like him. He made a recommendation, but regardless of the recommendation, I was going to fire Comey, knowing there was no good time to do it. And in fact, when I decided to just do it, I said to myself, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. It's an excuse by the Democrats for having lost an election that they should have won. So let me read that part again, because I know it's going to be asked about like 10 times. President Trump says, and in fact, when I decided to just do it, just fire Comey, I said to myself, this Russia thing with Trump and Russia is a made-up story. So it can be interpreted there, although it's not entirely clear, it can be interpreted, and many in the media are interpreting it as him saying there that he was firing Comey because of the Russia investigation in some sense. So those to me are going to be, those are two parts of the interview which are going to be asked about a lot. You will not hear one question and then Spicer will give an answer and that's it. I'm guessing you will hear repeated questions about this. And it could get confrontational because, yesterday there were questions. I talked about this, how there were a couple questions that didn't really even sound like questions. There were a couple questions that sounded like complaining and criticism, which, whether you think that's appropriate for that briefing just depends on what you think the decorum is. But if you think the decorum is that the press should be asking questions and not editorializing and complaining, then those questions might have annoyed you. One was from Major Garrett. The other one, I think, was from a New York Times reporter. But basically, there were questions about whether the press communication staff should be believed, that kind of stuff. And I'm guessing there might be more of that kind of stuff going on today, and we'll see how Sean Spicer reacts to it if it does happen. So could get confrontational in there. Maybe it's not. I hope it's all nice and friendly in there, but we'll see. So would like to get your thoughts. So how do you think this press briefing is going to go? What do you think is going to happen? And do you think the vibe will be different today because Sean Spicer is there, whereas Sarah Sanders was there yesterday? Let me know. Write to me. I'm at @Lookner on Twitter, @LOOKNER, or email me, steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Let me know your thoughts. And the briefing is supposed to start in 26 minutes at 1 p.m. Eastern. We will carry it live, and then we'll do a post show after. Stick around for the post show. We'll talk about the briefing afterwards. Sightless Seer writes let's see. What about the cyber attacks of ransomware being spread through Western European institutions such as the UK and NHS? If it gets spread here, likely would be very relevant to our own cybersecurity. And you also bring up and you say, or Jeff Sessions' outline of sentencing in the information released by the Justice Department today, such as North Carolina owner of tax preparation business sentenced to more than 10 years in prison for conspiracy to defraud the IRS. So I haven't heard about that story. In terms of, though, Sightless Seer, yeah, that cyber tax is a big story, and I've been tweeting about it this morning. That's something that could come up during the press briefing. I don't know if it will, but it is a big story. And that story is that Britain has a national health service. Basically, everybody in Britain gets their health care through the National Health Service. You all pay into it, and that's how it's like national health insurance. So you all get your medical care from the National Health Service, which runs the hospitals there. And over 90% of people get their health insurance through national health insurance there. And national health insurance, the National Health Insurance today has been the victim of a cyber attack. And Jake, can we show that tweet where a reporter showed what was purportedly the screenshot that they were getting? And Jake, will you just let me know when you've posted it? It's on the screen now. So this was posted, let me show you, by Lawrence Dunhill. I'm sorry? Sorry, Jake? Yeah. Lawrence Dunhill is the Health Service Journal correspondent. He's a Health Service Journal correspondent covering NHS finance in the Northwest. And Lawrence Dunhill sent out this picture today. And so reportedly, what was happening is a bunch of hospitals, maybe other facilities as well, but I know hospitals in this National Health Service in England, a lot of them they were not able to use their computers because they would get this screen when they open up their computer, and the screen basically says, your files have been encrypted, and I'm looking down to, it's saying where you have to pay. If you look on end of paragraph 1, nobody can recover your files without our decryption service. Middle of paragraph 2, you only have 3 days to submit the payment. After that, the price will be doubled. And then it says, how do I pay? Payment is accepted in Bitcoin only. And it says here somewhere, at the bottom you can say send $300 worth of Bitcoin. And $300 worth of Bitcoin, a Bitcoin right now is worth 1,800 American dollars approximately. So $300 in Bitcoin is approximately 540,000 American dollars. And I assume they're asking for this from each hospital. Now, originally, it seemed like this might be targeting the NHS itself. The NHS released a statement which said, this is not specifically targeting us. There are other institutions being affected like this. But this is a very wide attack. And this attack also has had a harmful effect on the patients there because some hospitals have sent patients away today and said some hospitals have not been doing services they would normally do today. I don't know the exact details about all of this, but I've seen these different reports. So presumably there are a lot of people who didn't get medical care that they would normally have gotten today from this. So this is a really big attack and on hospitals in England and at a lot of places. London is one of the cities being affected by this. So yeah, that's going on. Maybe it'll be Sean Spicer will be asked about it. And certainly this is a worry for America too, that you could have something, if it happens there, it certainly could happen here. I mean, we have hospitals who have information technology systems. And this is all, let me say this is also the kind of story that if it was in America going on, it would be such a big story. It would be crazy. But it's in England, it's not that big a story in the American media. But we thought it was important here. So we want to talk about it with you. Thank you, Sightless Seer, for bringing that up as well. We were going to talk about it anyway, but thank you for bringing it up. Let's see here. And you also mentioned the Jeff Sessions story, and I wanted to bring that up as well. So this is another and very important story which is not getting that much press today, because so much press coverage about all the Comey and Trump stuff and the interview and the tweets and everything. And we'll get to the tweets in a moment. But the Sessions story is that Jeff Sessions, let's sort of, I'll give you the brief summary of this. Under President Obama, there was this movement by the Justice Department to try to lessen the sentences that were given to nonviolent drug offenders. There's a school of thought that says too many people are in prisons in America. Prisons don't help people. They make people, if anything, more likely to commit crimes. They cost taxpayer money. So let's not have so many nonviolent drug offenders go to prison. That's a big reason for this. That's not the entire reason people give for wanting to lessen sentences, but that's a general big reason people give for wanting lesser sentences for nonviolent drug offenders. There's also social justice issues that are brought up. But anyways, under Eric Holder, the federal prosecutors were given guidance to not always prosecute as strongly as they could, and ask for the highest sentences and the highest charges they could ask for, but rather, when it comes to nonviolent drug offenders without large criminal records, be lenient on them so the chance of them getting in jail and the chance of them getting a lot of jail time would be lessened. There was somewhat of a reversal of that today when Jeff Sessions said, he made an announcement and said that the guidance he's going to give, and the Department of Justice is going to give to federal prosecutors, is going to be to generally go for, I want to see what the phrase he said is, if I can find it. It's something like, go for the highest charge, the most serious charge you can do given the evidence you have. I want to see if I can get the exact language here. Charge and pursue the most serious, readily provable offense. So he's basically saying, look, if you have evidence that can prove a certain charge, you should go for that charge. Under Holder's guidance, his guidance said something about that. There was something in it about that prosecutors were allowed to, were told that they should feel, if they felt it was a nonviolent drug offender and in the circumstances warranted, perhaps they wouldn't bring up the amount of drugs the person had on them in court, because that could lead to a stricter sentence, and so maybe that would be like left out of the proceedings in court. That's the impression I got. So Jeff Sessions basically was saying, like, hey, prosecutors, you should go for the most high charge and you could go, it's most serious charge you can go for. That's readily provable, that you have evidence that could prove. However, he did in his guidance, he did say that also he left open in the Department of Justice guidance that if in particular cases prosecutors felt like it would be unjust to go for a certain sentence, they have leeway to go for like a lesser sentence or a lesser charge. They just have to defend doing so. Let's see. I'm trying to find if I can find that exact wording here. Give me 1 second and see if I can find it. It is the guy. All right, so he said there will be circumstances in which good judgment would lead a prosecutor to conclude that a strict application of the above charging policy is not warranted. So he did leave it open for exceptions to be made by prosecutors. Also, I saw his speech this morning announcing this, and he said what we're really trying to do is to get enforcement of the laws that Congress has passed. He said that repeatedly. So it seemed to me that a major reason for this guidance in this somewhat reversal of the Holder policy is that Jeff Sessions thinks that, look, there are these laws on the books and they should be enforced. It's when he says something like that, it suggests that, he's not saying, to me, there's an implied message in there, which is like, hey, if you think the laws are too strict, then change the laws. If you think, that the minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenders are too high, then change those laws. And I understand that position. That position is similar to when the Supreme Court might say, perhaps there's a case about gay marriage that comes up in the Supreme Court, and there's a justice that says, I don't think states should allow gay marriage because the Constitution doesn't mention it. That doesn't mean that they're saying they don't think states should allow gay marriage, period. What they're saying is it's not in the Constitution, so if the country wants gay marriage, then the Congress should pass some law for allowing gay marriage. So it's this kind of, the point is that these kind of disagreements can be disagreements about, not about the policy itself in question, not about gay marriage or drug sentencing or anything else, but about whether the laws on the books should be enforced strictly, or whether the laws should not, or whether we should allow the prosecutors to not enforce the laws on the books as they're written. Similarly, whether the Supreme Court, whether we should read into the Constitution things that aren't actually written there, or we should stick to the original text or interpretation, or the original perceived meaning of that Constitution and thoughts of the founders. So I took Jeff Sessions today when he said when he talked about wanting to go for more stronger sentencing, given that he several times said we want to enforce the rules that are on the books. It seemed to me like he was really emphasizing, look, I don't think it's right when Congress passes laws, and those are the laws, and yet we have prosecutors not enforcing the laws. I mean, it's similar to the argument we've heard from some people in the Justice Department about sanctuary cities, and saying, look, this is the law. If sanctuary cities are happening, sanctuary cities don't enforce the laws that are on the books and don't help enforce them and treat them like they're not the laws. Now, there's different issues there because sanctuary cities are local authorities and they're not federal authorities. But anyways, so I didn't necessarily read today's announcement as an announcement that Jeff Sessions was saying, I approve of I approve of strict sentencing for nonviolent drug offenders as a policy. I took him as saying that's the law, and since it's the law, it should be enforced. But I feel like it's going to be read as and interpreted as I, Jeff Sessions, think that really strict sentences for nonviolent drug offenders are the best policy, which he didn't actually say in his speech. Okay. I've been talking a lot. Let's get to some of your comments, and I want to get to President Trump's tweets as well. The press briefing is supposed to start in 13 minutes, so we'll see if it starts on time or not. If you want to write in and talk about any of the issues that Sean Spicer is going to be asked about today, write to me at Lookner on Twitter or email me steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Speaking of which, I should just make sure I'm not skipping any of your emails or not ignoring any of them, not intentionally. Okay, so let's talk, by the way, about some of Trump's tweets this morning. President Trump sent out 7 tweets this morning, which I am positive will be asked about in the press briefing. And Jake, I think we have the tweets available, yes? So why don't we start, Jake? Ooh, hold on a second. Let me just pull up his page here. So I'm going to start, Jake, with the earliest one, which is the one again, the story that, and then I'll go in order of time. So Jake, do you want me to just go through them and you'll just post them as I go through them? Okay, so Jake's going to post these tweets. The first one Donald Trump sent out 4 hours ago was, again, the story that there was collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign was fabricated by Democrats as an excuse for losing the election. So I don't think this is going to be one of the big controversial ones that he might be asked about this, but this is not one of the big controversial ones he's going to be asked about. I think the next 6 are more ones he'll be asked about, specifically maybe the final 5. Okay, so let's move to the next one. The next one coming soon after this was the fake media is working overtime today. Okay. Now we're going to, the next tweet I think is one that will specifically be asked about. There's actually 2 tweets that are like one tweet, but he writes it over 2 tweets. So here's this one. As a very active president with lots of things happening, it is not possible for my surrogates to stand at the podium with perfect accuracy. Let me read that again. As a very active president with lots of things happening, it is not possible for my surrogates to stand at the podium with perfect accuracy. So I'm guessing we'll get a lot of questions, or at least some questions at press briefing like, so are we not supposed to believe what you say in the briefings because we're not sure you're accurate? So I'm guessing the press will be really angered about that tweet and ask a lot about it today, or at least a lot of members of the press will. After that, he tweeted out, the next one, maybe the best thing to do would be to cancel all future press briefings and hand out written responses for the sake of accuracy. So in this tweet, he could be seeing as possibly threatening to cancel future press briefings, which I know will make press... if you're a White House press reporter, you really don't want him to cancel these briefings. So no matter how they feel about this as like policy, I'm sure they feel like personally worried about this. So perhaps this is going to be the one that really most gets them upset and gets some press members upset and leads to some confrontation in the room. But I'm pretty darn sure they'll be asking about this, like, is he really going to cancel the press briefings? Do you think that's appropriate that he should? Should he be threatening this? So that'll be asked about. Okay, next tweet. Here's another one the press is talking about a lot this morning. James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. Again, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. So questions that'll be asked about this, which the press have been talking about this morning, is: are there tapes of the conversations? Is that illegal if President Trump is taping the conversations? I think I saw a congressman had sent a letter today. I'm not sure if it was the Department of Justice, I forget to who, but saying like this should be looked into whether these tapes or not. Is this a threat to James Comey? So these are all questions that I think you're going to hear asked in the press briefing about this one tweet. And let's see. Let's read the next two tweets. The next one is about James. It says James Clapper. When James Clapper himself and virtually everyone else with knowledge of the witch hunt says there is no collusion, when does it end? So President Trump here saying that he thinks he said before there's no collusion going on, and why do we keep looking into this and investigating this when there's no evidence of any collusion there. Now I think you might get a question in the press about this tweet saying like, hey, does this mean he wants to shut down the investigation because he thinks it's not going anywhere? So you'll probably get a question or two on that tweet. And then the last tweet is about a bit of a different topic. We'll see if they ask about this. But there was an agreement announced last night between the United States and China, where China had agreed to give some access that hadn't previously been given to certain United States industries in China. The beef industry, being allowed to sell more beef there. I saw something about credit card industry perhaps being allowed in there more than they have been, and some other things I can't remember right now. I'll have to go look up the story. But several different industries were supposedly going to be given more access to China. And if that happened, that could be very good for jobs in those industries in America. And President Trump tweeted out, China just agreed that the U.S. will be allowed to sell beef and other major products into China once again. This is real news, as opposed to fake news. So, so between the content of those tweets and the tones of those tweets, which were certainly they were fighting words, you're going to get, I think, a lot of questions about all those tweets. It would not surprise me if basically the whole press briefing was on those tweets. So would like to know what you think is going to happen in the press briefing today. It's only 7 minutes away. Don't know what it's going to be like in there. We'll see. And but would like to hear your thoughts. And I hope they talk about. They don't talk about all about the Comey stuff because it's endless, but that they talk about the China story, and they talk about the Attorney General, the new guidance on sentencing story. There's a lot of important stories out there that affect Americans, and I really hope it doesn't become 1 hour straight of Comey talk and attacking the administration and that kind of thing. Okay, I have a message here from. There was a couple here, sorry. Sightless Seer writes in, he says, maybe not canceling press briefings, but reevaluating individual networks that are established there and trade out for new ones, especially new media such as RSBN. It could be an interesting opportunity. That's a very interesting comment, Sightless Seer. And it does, if the president wants to do something about the press briefings but doesn't want to cancel them, one thing he could do, like you said, is change up who's in there in a sense. That would be seen as a way for him to do something but not take the step of canceling them. That's an interesting thought. And it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. So we'll see what he does. I mean, we'd love to be there, but in general, I also think it's an interesting possibility. Let me go to my email here. 5 minutes until the briefing is supposed to start. Let's see. So Vita Marie writes in, I personally like having written questions submitted after the announcements and receive answers by email. It sounds like, Vita Marie, what you're proposing is that Sean Spicer comes out there and reads announcements, and then they submit their questions in writing, and then they'd be answered by email. That certainly is another way they could do it. Let me say this. If there was ever a world, if President Trump ever did cancel the briefings for a time, I think they might actually do something like that where they say, hey, write your questions in and we'll answer them later in the day, and we'll answer them in a document. It could happen. So Vita Marie, very interesting suggestion as well. Thanks for writing in. There was also another story that came out this morning that I think will be asked about in the press briefing, where Donald Trump's lawyer, or his tax lawyer, released a statement saying that something to the effect that President Trump didn't have like investments in Russia. But let me call that up here if I can. So the AP reported Trump lawyer tax returns from the past 10 years show no income of any type from Russian sources with few exceptions. So that was reported by the AP this morning. And I'm guessing you might get a question in the press briefing like, well, couldn't they just make this clear by releasing his taxes? And then Sean Spicer will say he's not going to release his taxes. And they'll say, why isn't he going to release his taxes? And that'll go on for like 5 minutes. And then Jake will get really angry in the press in the studio because he can't stand when they keep asking about the tax returns. Let me do a quick peek also, because we've been on the air for a little while and I want to make sure that... Rare Pepe Merchant says, Steve Luckner for press secretary. Rare Pepe Merchant, I would not want that job at this point in time. I don't think I'd want it for any president. It's such a hard job. It's think of what you gotta every day you're always being asked all these hostile questions, and you have to try not to anger the press, but also you have to serve your boss, and it's a whole thing. So it's definitely not easy.
Steve, that poses a good question, actually.
Yes.
If you were press secretary, who would on SNL, who would be the one to reenact you on SNL?
They would need... Do they have somebody who's like Jewish looking on staff right now? Maybe they'd have to get Adam Sandler to come back and do it.
I think Adam, that would probably work, and they would have to have a deep affection for all kinds of vegetables as well.
Yes.
So you would basically have a pack of carrots next to you while it's happening.
So there we have it. And we have about 2 minutes, by the way, until the press briefing starts. And, well, it's supposed to start in 2 minutes. We'll see if it starts on time. It started early a few days ago, then it started late, a couple days later. Who knows when it'll start? We're here Right Side Broadcasting, bringing it to you, though. And join us for the post-show. And I should say, if you enjoy our coverage and the fact that we do a pre-show and a post-show every day of these press briefings, hope you consider donating, because we do rely on your donations to stay on the air. We can't stay on the air without you guys. You're the major part of our operating budget. So if you'd like to donate, you can always go to rsbn.tv/donate. That's rsbn.tv/donate. Or you can go click on the $ in the chat room. And when you click on the $, you can, at the bottom, there's a chat room on YouTube next to our broadcast, and you can click on the $, and that makes it easy to donate. Or you can set up like a recurring donation. I was going to take a drink of water anyway. If you set up a monthly donation on Patreon, you can get like cool Right Side stuff in return, like this Right Side mug, which comes in the gift bags, which we give to people who donate a certain amount. I can't remember how much. But if you want to check out what kind of stuff you can get for donating monthly, go to www.patreon.com/RSBN. Thank you to the moderators for moderating the chat very much, by the way. Appreciate it today. And if you're on Facebook watching, feel free to share this video today. It really helps us when you share the video, let other people know about Right Side. We're a small company. We can't afford to put big advertisements everywhere about Right Side, so it really helps when you share the videos. There was something else I wanted to mention. I'm trying to remember what it was. America First says, I could see Adam Sandler playing you on SNL. Well, at least there's, I guess, a sort of superficial resemblance in some sort of way. We both have short hair. Let's see here. There was something I wanted to say. What was it? It was something we were talking about this morning. I think we were talking about it in the office. It was something involving President Trump. It was, I can't remember. I'll try to think of it. Anyways, if you have any comments as we're waiting for the briefing, we'd love to hear your comments. I'm really interested in knowing what you think, how the briefing will go today. Do you think it'll be like a normal briefing? Do you think it'll be kind of crazy in there? What do you think? I mean, the last couple of days have been pretty intense. And what do you think is going to happen? So write to me and let me know. I want to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, does it seem to you, it seems to me like things have been even more intense the last couple of days. Just, with you have the press and all they're going crazy over this Comey stuff, and then you have President Trump's tweets this morning, and it's a real, and then there was the press briefing yesterday got kind of confrontational, and you had these hearings with McCabe yesterday where he was being asked all these questions about the FBI and Comey and everything. And I remembered what I was going to say, which was Joe, my boss Joe, pointed out this morning to me a tweet by Matt Drudge, where Matt Drudge has sent out a couple tweets basically saying that he was worried that the leaks were going to really have a harmful effect on the administration. And I thought that was an interesting view. Jake, I don't know if we can get one of those tweets up there from Matt Drudge. Let's see if I can find it. Oh, you're so good. Presidency, there's a Trojan horse plotting within the inner circle. So I think Jake's going to get that up there. So there are a lot of leaks. I know there's a lot from the intelligence community that we've heard about. There are a lot of leaks in the White House because, like, every day, it seems like there's multiple stories citing White House sources about what's going on in the White House. Here's what President Trump does late at night. Here's what happened behind the scenes in the Comey firing. Now, I'm not saying these leaks are honest and that the stories are all accurate. What I'm saying is there are people in the White House who are talking. And that in itself, the amount of that's happening seems a little, I guess to me, worrying. I understand what Matt Drudge is saying. It just seems like there's so much communication going on between people in the administration and people in the executive branch, from people in the intelligence community, talking to all these papers and giving all these comments. And regardless of whether they're saying true things or not, it's just so much of it. I could certainly see how President Trump might be frustrated by this, but it just seems like, can this keep going on with this amount of leaks? And Matt Drudge thinks as Matt Drudge says, leaks on every hour will destroy Trump presidency. So we'll see what happens with that. But I could see that. I'm guessing that's a topic that's talked about within the White House a lot. Okay, we are at 1:04 p.m. And the briefing is supposed to start at 1. So anytime now the briefing will start, Jake will tell me and we will go right to it. And I predict this is going to be more confrontational than even yesterday was. That's what I think. But maybe I'm wrong. And I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. And I will say, I wonder if they'll at least take some time off from the briefings. If they continue to be these kind of confrontational briefings, will they take time off? Another interesting thing is that President Trump hasn't had a public appearance in a week. He did the interview with Lester Holt, but he hasn't done any of the White House appearances, the appearances where he talks to some business leaders or talks to a foreign leader. He did do the thing where he had the Henry Kissinger thing where he did a photo op thing, but no big public appearances. I don't know, is it just that nothing has come up, or is there a specific reason for this? Maybe he feels like he's not being covered fairly, so he wants to not appear so much in front of the press. Maybe he's busy working on other things. Maybe there's North Korea stuff that's keeping him busy. I don't know, but it is noteworthy, I think. Don't know why it is, though. Andrew Sova said, did you hear anything about this? Tucker Carlson reported this last night. I guess illegal persons are having issues getting into America, so they're terrorizing Mexico. I've heard nothing about it, Andrew. It's the story in The Sun is we need to keep them out now. Mexico wants to build a border wall to keep out illegal immigrants from El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala. I'll have to look at the story later. Thank you, Andrew, for sending it to me. I hadn't heard of it yet. America First says, hey, what did you think about Trump's tweet this morning about Comey speaking to the press? The tweet that said, hey, James Comey better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. So we talked about that a bit earlier, America First. You might have just joined us here. So, it's on the one hand, I can understand President Trump not wanting James Comey to speak to the press and wanting to keep things in-house. I could see President Trump being upset by leaks going on in the White House and not wanting James Comey to just go out and it's like one more source of inside information, another, another thing is, but also maybe President Trump thinks that James Comey is going to go out and tell some side of the story that President Trump doesn't think is true. So, because when you look at the tweet, it says, better hope that there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. So, one way of reading that tweet is that, look, James Comey, if you start saying stuff to the press that's not true, I'm going to be able to show why you're lying. And so, now, there is a thing about this, though, which is you might think the tapes things doesn't look great for President Trump because it's like, in theory, I don't know the legality of this. I have to look it up. But in theory, it's probably not cool if the president is taping people in his office without telling them. Now, maybe though he has tapes in quotes, maybe he could mean records of our conversation, So, I don't know. So I guess I can understand, there's different thoughts I have on this. I understand if President Trump doesn't want James Comey to go out and say things to the press that President Trump thinks are false. And maybe President Trump is saying something like, look, before you go out and do that, just know that we might have records of here which show you're false. But the tapes thing could be a little worrying, and if he didn't really mean tapes, maybe it's better not to use the word tapes because there is a bunch of concern out there now, like, hey, is the president taping people? And this is going to be one of these things that this will be talked about a lot. The whole taping thing, it's kind of like the wiretapping tweet where it's going to just, I think the press is going to latch onto it and talk about it a ton, and it'll just it'll make it harder for the president to concentrate and get the word out about his legislative changes he wants to make, and it might be just like this side issue. Let's say there are no tapes. President Trump might have to spend a lot of time dealing with this side tape tweet that is taking time away where he could be dealing with more important issues and also it could also take from policy issues, and they could be just focusing on this tape thing. So I have different thoughts about it. We'll see what happens. I'm sure it'll be asked about in the press briefing today. Deplorable Jenny sent me a tweet from Jack Posobiec, which I had seen, which is CNN planning to ask for copies of Trump. I'm guessing every network might just do that for the heck of it, even though there might not be any. Why not send a request for it? And they can say, Jack is at the press briefing today. Again, I saw him post a picture, Jack Posobiec. It's 1:10 p.m. now. The briefing should start any time now. We will bring it to you live. And stick around for the post show. We will definitely be back for a post show and talk about what happened in the briefing. I know a lot of you yesterday, in our post show had some strong thoughts about what happened in the briefing. A lot of you didn't like how the press was behaving in there. So we'll take your comments on the air. And if during the briefing you have some thoughts about what's going on and you want to make some comments, I'm happy to read them after the briefing. So write to me. You can write to me on Twitter at Lookner, at Lookner, or email me steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. Here's a report from NBC. According to BNO News, Jake, I don't know if you can get this tweet up. If you can't, it's fine. But if you look up BNO News, Jake, it's up there. And the tweet says, according to NBC, a source close to Comey says the FBI director hopes there are tapes of his... Sorry, let me read this more in English. A source close to Comey says the former FBI director hopes there are tapes of his conversations with Trump. Quote, that would be perfect. I don't know who's being quoted there, maybe the source and not Comey himself. But that's from NBC. According to BNO News, that's from NBC. But who knows what the source is there? Jack Posobiec is also saying, MSNBC, he's at the briefing now, he's saying that MSNBC is saying they're going to drill Spicer over Trump taping Comey. So again, here's the worry about the taping thing. I feel like maybe it's one of these cases, maybe, where Trump was speaking loosely, and perhaps there aren't any tapes. Maybe there are not any tapes, and President Trump was kind of speaking loosely or whatever and didn't mean to imply that there are actual tapes. But because he mentioned the word tapes, like half this press briefing could be about tapes, and hours and hours and hours of coverage will be spent on tapes. And that just gets in the way of the president doing other things. I mean, think of how much time has been being spent on this Comey thing this week. It's like you're hearing nothing about kind of like legislation and the health bill and the tax bill, and I don't even know if that's being dealt with, and certainly the American public isn't focusing on it. Congress is probably going to spend a lot of time, talking about this Comey stuff and, not dealing with passing legislation. So it just worries me that this kind of stuff can crowd out things, making legislative changes that'll help the American people. So that's a worry I have. And I really think it's not even like that tapes thing. That one thing could just be so much of what's talked about today. Because it's like sexy for the media to talk about it. So they will talk about it so much today. Let's see here. I'm just seeing if there's any more updates. So it's 1:13 right now. Anytime now, the press briefing will start. And as I was saying before, we'll go to it live. I was making the point before that President Trump hasn't been out in public that much this week. Matt Weiser of the Boston Globe, who I know a lot of you might think the Boston Globe is a very liberal paper, but at the same time, Matt Weiser is usually pretty balanced in his coverage. I follow Matt. But Matt, he's the Washington bureau chief for the Globe, but he says in one of his tweets this morning, it is striking how little we have seen of President Trump this week. So I do agree he hasn't been out, in public that much this week. And again, a lot of reasons possibly for that. It's just something I think it's worth observing. Breaking News Live, Breaking N Live is as an update on the NHS hacking thing going on in Britain, says a number of companies in Spain, UK, and Scotland have been hacked by NHS hackers, a number of companies. Jake, by the way, this is Breaking N Live. That's where this is at. But if you can't get it up there, it's fine, Jake, but I'll let you know. So what we have is Jake is in the studio, and when I mention a tweet, Jake can get it up there. But I don't know what I'm going to talk about. I make it hard for Jake because I just bring up a tweet that's, if it's coming up during the show, I bring it up, but it's very hard for Jake to really quickly get it up there. So he does a great job of doing that, but sometimes, don't blame Jake if he can't get the tweet up there. I'm sorry? It's the one, it's Breaking N Live, and it's from, you know what, Jake? Did they take it down? Let me see this again. It looks like, Jake, so I saw this tweet, and it's on my, all right, so Jake, this tweet was on my timeline as of 30 seconds ago, and then I went to their page and it's down, so they might have taken it down. So I apologize. It looks like they took the tweet down. I'd heard reports about companies in Spain being hacked as well as at the NHS, but I hadn't heard about companies in the UK and Scotland. So maybe they're retracting their report. Thank you, Jake, for looking. Vita Marie writes in, the president is probably being sarcastic with tapes because of so many leaks. At least that's how I take it. It's very possible, Vita Marie. When he says at least I hope there aren't that any tapes. he could be kind of joking around and with Comey there, and kind of, he might think when he tweets that there aren't tapes. But when he says something like that, the risk is that it'll be taken literally, and just so much energy will be put on it. I hope it's not a giant distraction, but I hope it's not a giant distraction, but I worry it very well might be. We'll see how much it's going to be asked about in the briefing, but I worry it's going to be a lot. Let's see here. I'm looking for some updates here. Okay, so it's 1:16 right now. Jake, how are things looking in the press room, by the way? Nothing. No sign of it. Are there people in there? There's people in there, though. Yeah, so there are people in there, but no Sean Spicer yet. We will go to that briefing right when it starts today. So let's see, so much going on. I feel like there must be other stuff going on, like in the world that but I don't even know if he'll be asked about it. I mean, it's like you don't hear about like North Korea anymore. Was there ever a question asked in the press briefings this week about the South Korean president? So South Korea elected a new president a few days ago, and this new president wants to have better economic relations with North Korea, and potentially wants to get rid of the THAAD missile defense system that we just put into South Korea, and has said that he's not in favor of it. And that might cause real tension between us and South Korea when it comes to North Korea policy, because we want to isolate them. We don't want to have like economic cooperation with them. And that's the kind of thing that's a really important story, and I don't even think it's been asked about. If it has, it hasn't been talked about much in the press briefings. Maybe it was asked about like once or something, but that's a big story. And that's also a story where you forget it's going on and it's not being reported on, but at any moment, South Korea could do a nuclear test, and that could become like a huge crisis at any moment, and you're just not hearing about it right now. So we'll see what happens. Also, let me remind you of this. A lot of times in this administration, there's like one big story going on, and then something else happens, and we totally move on to something new. And the last couple of days, it's been Comey, and it might seem like it's going to go on forever, but you never know. Also, let me say this. There have been times, it seems like, where stuff was going on, and then Trump did some sort of thing that kind of changed the narrative and led to some other story being talked about. So who knows what will happen? Just don't assume this is going to be the big story for the next few days. It might seem really big now, but you never know what will happen. Vita Marie says, the president thrives on energy. LOL. Thanks, Vita, for writing. Sorry, I'm just pulling up my email. It had disappeared. Okay, it's time check, 1:19. Running a little late today. Oh, okay, so I guess the briefing is about to begin. We're going to go to the briefing. Enjoy the briefing. Join us after for the post show, where we'll be taking your comments on the briefing. We'll see you soon.
Chip, we haven't heard from Sean Spicer from this White House podium since there is a significant tweet when Donald Trump, President of the United States, fired the FBI director. He's helping to oversee at the time an ongoing FBI intelligence operation, investigation into possible links to Russia and the Trump campaign that has dominated the airwaves and dominated headlines ever since. So Sean Spicer will be back at the podium today, the same day the President of the United States, his boss, in many ways undermined the credibility of the White House spokesperson, saying to the American public that they cannot expect that his spokespeople, his is, he said, to be perfectly accurate when they are speaking on his behalf, because there's so much going on. That was an oblique reference, of course, to some conflicting accounts that we've heard over the past few days of what went into the president's decision and exactly when he made it and on whose advice he operated on when he hired the FBI director. Initially we heard it was, of course, the deputy attorney general at the FBI. Now we're hearing from the president. It was his own decision. He made it a long time ago.
That's absolutely right, Jared. You know, what we're expecting is to be open from
Well, certainly he has provided more questions for all of us to be asking of him through his surrogate, through Sean Spicer, the press secretary. This has not in any way lessened the scrutiny or the pressure surrounding those allegations. And they remain allegations because this is an ongoing FBI investigation surrounding Russia and his campaign. This in many ways raised the temperature. It did not in any way slow any of the questioning around it. And so that we expect to hear more questions about today, as Nancy just laid out for you, those questions that we now have about whether there are actual recordings here being made in the White House of the President of the United States speaking to the then FBI director. When were these made? Were they on the 3 occasions that he said in an NBC interview were the times at which he spoke to the FBI director and received assurances that he says he was not under investigation, something that there are now questions about from our own Jeff McManus's reporting and from what we have heard from the Director of National Intelligence, who is no longer holding that position, James Clapper, who has said a lot of this account doesn't really sound like the man he knew when it came to his colleague James Comey, who now is remaining at his Virginia home, and I'm sure we'll be interested to hear some of the answers to the questions that all of us will be asking today. Thank you again.
Feel free to finish, Scott. Wow, got a full house today. Good afternoon. It's good to be back with you. Apparently I was a little missed. We're 1 week out from the president's first foreign trip. So I wanted to make sure as we prepare for that trip that I bring up our National Security Advisor, General McMaster, to give you a preview of what the team has been doing to prepare for the president's trip. Our goal is to kind of start that process now, and then next week bring the general back and give you a more detailed update as to what the president's going to be doing in each of the areas and some of the highlights from the trip. We'll obviously additionally have background briefings for you as well to give the team that's going to be traveling from the press corps some logistical updates. So without further ado, General McMaster.
Will you take questions after him, Sean?
Yes, Jeff, I will be glad to take your question. In fact, if you'd like, you get to go first today.
Hey, thank you, Sean. Good afternoon and happy Mother's Day weekend, everybody. As you all know, in exactly 1 week, the president will embark on his first trip abroad since taking office. Today, I'd like to explain the president's objectives for his visits to the Middle East and to Europe, and also preview a bit of the schedule. The trip has 3 core purposes. First, to reaffirm America's global leadership. Second, to continue building key relationships with world leaders. And third, to broadcast a message of unity to America's friends, and to the faithful of three of the world's greatest religions. The president prioritizes building strong relationships, as you see here every day, with world leaders as a way to strengthen our alliances. And he's been successful. You can see that in his diplomacy with a range of leaders, from Prime Minister May to President Xi. President Trump understands that America first does not mean America alone. To the contrary, prioritizing American interests means strengthening alliances and partnerships that help us extend our influence and improve the security of the American people. This trip is truly historic. No president has ever visited the homelands and holy sites of the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim faiths all on one trip. And what President Trump is seeking is to unite peoples of all faiths around a common vision of peace, progress, and prosperity. He will bring a message of tolerance and of hope to billions, including to millions of Americans who profess these faiths. The president will focus on what unites us. The president's trip will begin in Saudi Arabia, home to the two holiest sites in Islam. He will encourage our Arab and Muslim partners to take bold, new steps to promote peace and to confront those from ISIS to Al-Qaeda to Iran to the Assad regime who perpetuate chaos and violence that has inflicted so much suffering throughout the Muslim world and beyond. He will lead the first steps toward a stronger, more capable, and more robust security partnership with our Gulf, Arab, and Muslim partners. And he will develop a strong, respectful message that the United States and the entire civilized world expects our Muslim allies to take a strong stand against radical Islamist ideology, an ideology that uses a perverted interpretation of religion to justify crimes against all humanity. He will call for Muslim leaders to promote a peaceful vision of Islam. The president will then travel to Israel. With President Rivlin and Prime Minister Netanyahu, he will reaffirm America's unshakable bond to the Jewish state. With President Abbas, he will express his desire for dignity and self-determination for the Palestinians. And to leaders and peoples alike across the entire trip, he will demonstrate his hopes for just and lasting peace. In Rome, the president will be honored to accept an audience with Pope Francis. He looks forward to paying his respects and to discussing religious freedom, ways to combat religious persecution, human trafficking, and cooperating on humanitarian missions across the globe. He will also pay his respects to the Italian people by meeting with President Mattarella, the head of state and one of America's most important treaty allies and trading partners. He'll also see again Prime Minister Gentiloni, who is hosting the G7 conference in Sicily. From Rome, the president will continue to Brussels for the NATO leaders meeting. There he will reaffirm America's commitment to the alliance, while stressing the need for members to pay their fair share, to shoulder responsibility, to share burdens, and for the institution to continue on the path of strengthening the alliance. President Trump will end his trip in Sicily for the G7 meeting in Taormina, where he will promote American economic leadership and also address unfair trade practices. He will remind our friends and partners that we are eager to explore further ways to address threats to our mutual security, from North Korea to Afghanistan to the broader Middle East. Before leaving, the president will visit Naval Air Station Sigonella, where he will thank our wonderful and courageous servicemen and women, allied personnel and family members for their sacrifices to keep us safe. And across the trip, he will meet our diplomats, the staff in our embassies who represent us so well across the world. Lastly, just a few words on how this all came together. The impetus for this trip came from the president himself, and he has been fully engaged from the beginning, setting objectives, overseeing the planning. The president is receiving regular briefings from his cabinet and from our senior staff here on the national security side and on the economic side as well. Most of the leaders the president will meet on this trip, as you know, he's already met in person or certainly by phone. These relationships are off to a very strong start, and the trip is an opportunity to broaden and deepen those relationships. The administration continues to be in close contact and consultation with Congress, and we're drawing on the expertise across the Senate and the House in preparation for the trip as well. And finally, this really is a team effort. The White House and National Security Council staffs, the National Economic Council, continue to work closely with our Departments of State, Treasury, Defense, and others to fulfill the President's objectives and ensure smooth execution. On behalf of the President, I express the whole administration's thanks for all the hard work it takes to organize a trip of this scope and of this importance. So the President of all of us are looking forward to the journey. And with that, I'll take a couple of questions. Defer to Shonda.
General McMaster, how is this president viewed among our Arab allies, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others, compared to his predecessor?
Well, I'll just say the president's leadership has been welcomed enthusiastically. There was a perception that America had largely disengaged from the Middle East in particular, and that disengagement coincided with this humanitarian and political catastrophe in the region. And so now there's a broad recognition among all of our partners in the region that American leadership is necessary to help address this catastrophe and to begin to move the region toward the peace, security, and stability that the people there so deserve. And so what you're seeing, I think, is a galvanizing effect of the president's leadership in bringing those leaders together across the region, bringing them together for a positive agenda, right? Who's against ending this catastrophe? Who's against confronting these terrorists who are the enemies of all civilized people? Confronting Iran, who's participating in this cycle of violence, and to bring prosperity, peace to the region and the people who so richly deserve it. Thanks.
Somebody who is crucial, obviously, in the intelligence community, somebody who's leading the National Security Council. So I have to ask you, this week in particular, there have been a lot of reports, including from our network, that intelligence officials are extremely concerned about how James Comey was fired. Do you believe that that threatens national security right now?
Well, I told Sean that I would pass all those questions to him, and he'll be happy to answer that after this. After this, but what I'd like to do is focus on I'd like to focus on the trip, and I'll come back next week with more details of the trip as well. Thanks,
John.
You said the president the impetus for the trip came from the president himself. Was it the president himself who decided to begin this trip in Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam? And is there symbolic significance to that? And how many of our Muslim allies, how many Muslim majority countries will be represented at the meetings in Saudi Arabia?
Yes. Well, this was the president's initiative to begin the trip in the Middle East. Hosted by King Salman and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And the king is going to bring together partners from across the region to meet with the president. So the answer to your question is, and I can answer in more detail next week, because it's still coming in, some of the final attendees, but he'll meet with a broad range of leaders in the Middle East. Of course, most of whom he's met already here, or by phone certainly. And we have the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed is coming, for example, on Monday as well.
Steve.
Sean, General McMaster, at the beginning of this very long week, we were hearing speculation that the president was considering thousands more troops for Afghanistan. When he goes to Brussels on Thursday of next week, what is the message to the NATO partners with respect to their commitment in this long fight?
Well, the key is that all of us have to be committed, right, to achieving our fundamental objectives in Afghanistan. I mean, Americans know really better than anybody, because the mass murder against our own country on September 11, 2001 originated with the terrorist safe haven and support base in Afghanistan. Recently, we have been engaged against ISIS or in ISIS Khorasan in Afghanistan with highly successful operations there that you'll hear more about in a press conference at the Department of Defense here in the near future. But what has happened in Afghanistan is the Afghan army is taking the brunt of the fight against these transnational terrorists and the Taliban. And so we're working with our allies to figure out what more we can do to have a more effective strategy in Afghanistan? What are options we can bring to the president to be more effective in meeting our objectives in Afghanistan? And what more can we ask our allies to do, which we're asking them now? So this is going to be really consistent with the president's guidance to us.
Has the president decided that there should be thousands more troops? Is that
The president has not made a decision yet on a course of action. What we have done, which is what we have done in many cases on the North Korea problem set, for example, is we've consulted broadly across our government and with allies. The president wants to hear from our allies as well. This is a president who listens to his allies and partners, who have an opportunity to do so at the NATO summit, who have an opportunity to do so at the G7. And so what we'll have at the end of this next few weeks here is an opportunity for a much more effective strategy for the problem set in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the region broadly.
Jessica.
Thank you, Sean. General, if you could talk first about the evolution from the way the president campaigned, which was a more unilateral foreign policy, to this multilateral engagement that you're emphasizing, and the way that you're rolling out this trip to explain that. And then secondly, if you could also talk about the decision to send a delegation to the One Belt, One Road forum in China, and what you hope to get out of that.
Okay.
Thank
All right.
you.
So America First never didn't mean America alone ever. I don't think. And so what we have done is advance the president's agenda in national security by strengthening alliances by burden sharing. Americans don't have to do everything, don't have to bankroll everything, and our allies and partners are grateful for, I think, the president's leadership in asking them to do more. So is an alliance in which each of the members are doing their fair share, who are shouldering the burden, is it stronger or weaker? It's stronger. So the president has done a great deal to strengthen our alliances. And America First didn't mean America not leading, right? So for America to secure and advance its interests, that requires American leadership. And so the president's leadership has been welcomed in all of the places that he'll be visiting on this trip, and his agenda, I think, that he laid out in the campaign is being operationalized and implemented by his cabinet primarily, with the assistance of our team here in the White House.
Can I just press you on that, General?
Two questions. First, there were reports out of Israel that President Trump may try to get Benjamin Netanyahu and Mahmoud Abbas in the same room together while he's there. Is that in fact the case? And also, to NBC News yesterday, the president said that General Mattis and his other generals would be announcing something on ISIS next week. And so, as one of the generals on his administration, can you talk to that? Is there an announcement coming next week?
On the first part, it'll be whatever the president wants to do. So a lot of what we do in the National Security Council is try to keep up with the president. So you may have I think there are plans
to reach out to both of them to get them together.
The final plans aren't set yet. We can comment maybe more about that next week. But it'll obviously be up to the president and those leaders about how he wants to engage with them. But he'll engage with both those leaders there as part of the trip. In terms of the campaign against transnational terrorist organizations and ISIS in particular, the president has asked us to do everything we can to defeat ISIS, and in particular to ensure that we defeat ISIS in this, the so-called caliphate in the terrain that they're endeavoring to hold on to in Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, and other areas. And what the president has also told us is he doesn't want to telegraph what he's doing tactically, day to day. He wants the Department of Defense and our military commanders to be able to execute those campaigns consistent with his guidance, the policy, and the strategy that he's approved. And so what next week will do will be an opportunity for our military leadership to lay out how they are executing the president's guidance, the progress they've made in the campaign, and what remains to be done. And so that's really the emphasis of the press conference next week.
Thank you, General.
Can we hear about Russia and the agreements that were made this week with Russia's top diplomat? I mean, you're going to the region to speak with Arab allies. How are you going to explain agreements you've made with Russia, allied with Iran, in Syria, a place that the president has said is now a priority for him?
I would characterize the engagements with Russian leadership by our Secretary of State, the brief meeting that the president had with Foreign Minister Lavrov, the phone conversations that we've had with Russian leadership as engagements, not decisions or specific approaches. I think what the president has made clear is that he will confront Russian disruptive behavior, such as its support for the murderous Assad regime in Syria, and its enabling of Iran and its very destructive policy and strategy that it's executing across the Middle East. what it's done and continued to do in Ukraine. He'll confront that disruptive behavior, but the president's looking for areas of cooperation. There are a lot of very significant security problem sets across the world. All of them would get easier, right? If Russia were to come to the conclusion that it could best advance its interests through cooperating with the United States and others to resolve those conflicts rather than perpetuate them.
But aren't they party to those conflicts and causing them in Syria? I mean, the president said at the end of his meeting with Lavrov that it was really good, that there was, he spoke in very positive terms, that there was progress made. Are you saying there were no agreements?
The president spoke in positive, affirmative, strong terms in his engagements with Russian leaders.
Thank you very much.
Just following my question.
I'll take one more. Sean.
Back here, actually. Can you tell us a little bit more about the America First policy, about how it changed over time? Because it's not been very clear what it means and how other people would want to sign up for it.
Well, what it means is that the president is prioritizing the security and interests of the American people. You can see that with what Secretary Ross has done in the economic relationship with China, to look for ways to advance American prosperity. Every theme of this trip is wholly consistent with the president's approach to prioritize the American people, American security, American jobs, American prosperity. And so you'll see that with I think, almost a refreshing, I would say, integration of what we're doing in terms of security partnerships, along with economic relationships, and the diplomatic engagement that the president's cabinet has been engaged with since he's taken over as president. And this trip is going to be a tremendous way to solidify the gains already made and advance them further.
General.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, General McMaster. I'm going to go through a couple updates and schedule before I get to your questions, and Jeff will get the first one. First off, Secretary Ross, I know, was up here last night to tell you about the developments, and General McMaster just noted at the developments that have happened and advances that have happened in trade. The 10 commitments that Secretary Ross announced yesterday are the initial results of the 100-day action plan of the United States-China Comprehensive Economic Dialogue, which began with President Trump and President Xi's meeting in Mar-a-Lago. Under the leadership of Secretaries Ross, Mnuchin, and their Chinese counterparts, the United States has negotiated intensively to reach consensus in areas including agricultural trade, financial services, investment, and energy. One of the actions I want to point out in particular sets the stage for China to allow imports of American beef beginning no later than July 16th of this year. It's been 13 years since our cattle producers have been effectively locked out of the Chinese market. China is the second largest beef importer in the world, buying roughly $2.6 billion of beef every year. In a statement last night, the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, the nation's largest association of cattle farmers, said, and I quote, "It's impossible to overstate how beneficial this will be for America's cattle producers and how the Trump administration deserves a lot of credit for getting this achieved," end quote. This announcement came on the same day that Secretary Perdue visited a barge loading facility in the Ohio River and announced that he will appoint the first ever Undersecretary for Trade and Foreign Agriculture Affairs at the U.S. Department of Agriculture. This is further proof of the seriousness of which the administration is approaching the promotion of U.S. agricultural products abroad. And that's just one part of the deal that was reached. Here are some of the other highlights that we have worked with China. 8 pending biotech patents from the United States firms will be evaluated at a meeting of China's National Biosafety Committee by the end of May. We welcome China to receive imported liquefied natural gas, with companies allowed to proceed at any time to negotiate contracts. China will allow foreign-owned financial services firms in China to provide credit rating services and credit investigations. By July 16th, China will issue further guidance to allow American-owned suppliers of electronic payment services to operate in China. And China will allow 2 American financial institutions to issue underwriting and settlement licenses no later than July 16th. As we continue to make progress within the 100-day framework, including discussion of a 1-year plan to solidify action that will benefit both of our countries. Moving on, this morning, Attorney General Sessions issued a memo that restores flexibility to prosecutors so that they can most effectively combat the crisis of illegal drug trafficking that is polluting our cities and destroying our communities and families. This policy was formulated after extensive consultation with the prosecutors that handle these cases each and every day around the country. With these additional options available to them, they now have the leverage they need to get at the root of drug trafficking and the violent crime that surrounds it. As the Attorney General said this morning, this will take the handcuffs off our nation's prosecutors, and if I can add, it frankly puts the handcuffs on the drug traffickers who threaten the safety of our families and communities. The Trump administration is signaling to the worst of the worst, the drug traffickers who violate our drug laws to move these dangerous substances around our border and into our communities, that the United States Department of Justice will no longer look the other way. This week, the administration has also been busy engaging with senators and their staffs now that the American Health Care Act and the relief it promises for the American people is in the Senate's hands. I know Sarah talked to you yesterday about how Aetna has pulled out of Obamacare exchanges completely, leaving only one insurer in some of the markets. Another report yesterday out from eHealth showed that the average premium for individual plans has spiked 39% since 2014. In some cases, insurance premiums and out-of-pocket expenses have become families' most significant expenses. With each new report, it becomes clearer and clearer that we can't wait any longer to repeal and replace this failing system. Until we enact serious reforms of the healthcare system, the American people will continue to suffer under the consequences. Tomorrow, the president will deliver his first commencement address in Lynchburg, Virginia at Liberty. He is greatly looking forward to visiting with Liberty students and faculty who gave him such a warm welcome last year. He can be expected to note to the graduates his own change in status since they were last together. As many of you know, Liberty is the largest Christian school in the nation and has in recent years made many remarkable strides forward in its academic, extracurricular, and athletic endeavors. Besides taking note of these achievements, the president will be congratulating the graduates on their accomplishments and encouraging them to be a force for good in the world by standing up for their values that Liberty has taught them. He will be offering congratulations, thanks, and praise and encouragement on a day of optimism and new beginnings for the graduates as well as the nation. In terms of the rundown for next week, the president has a very packed schedule before we depart on his first foreign trip. On Monday, he's hosting the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates. On Tuesday, he'll welcome the president of Turkey. On Wednesday, the president will travel to New London, Connecticut to deliver the commencement address at the United States Coast Guard Academy. On Thursday, the president of Colombia will be at the White House for an official visit. And on Friday, we set off on the trip, with the first stop being Saudi Arabia. And finally, in honor of Mother's Day, this afternoon, the First Lady will host a reception in honor of military mothers in the residence, followed by a performance by the Army Chorus and Marine Band. The White House will issue a Mother's Day proclamation later as well. Beyond all of the activity here, this is the official reminder to everyone to get your flowers and cards before it's too late. And with that, Jeff Mason.
Thank you for that reminder, Sean.
You're welcome.
Moving on to the news of the week, really, and the day. Did President Trump record his conversations with former FBI Director Comey?
I assume you're referring to the tweet, and I've talked to the president. The president has nothing further to add on that.
Why did he say that? Why did he tweet that? What should we interpret from that?
As I mentioned, the president has nothing further to add on that.
Are there recording devices in the Oval Office or in the residence?
As I've said for the third time, there is nothing further to add on that.
Does he think it's appropriate to threaten someone like Mr. Comey not to speak?
I don't think that's not a threat. He's simply stated a fact. The tweet speaks for itself. I'm moving on. John.
If I could quote another one of the president's tweets this morning, he said, quote, "Russia must be laughing up their sleeves watching as the U.S. tears itself apart over a Democrat excuse for losing the election." What did the president mean by that? How specifically is the U.S. tearing itself apart over all of this?
I think the president's comments about the Russia and collusion have been very clear with respect to some of the charges that have been made. He's been very clear that it's one thing that he believes that the notion that there's collusion is a hoax. It's been reaffirmed by several people, including Senator Grassley and others who have spoken to him, and that he wants to make sure that he's focused every day on doing what's best for the American people.
I understand all that. You've said that many times, but how is the U.S. tearing itself apart?
Well, I think obviously this has been a subject that comes up over and over again when it's been very clearly stated on multiple occasions that there's no collusion that occurred, and yet this narrative continues to be perpetuated.
Do you think this is what the Russians wanted all along in interfering with the election?
I don't. I have no idea. But what I'm just telling you is I think we've made it clear at this podium several times, and I think the president made it clear that what his feelings are on this.
Sean, in the dinner that the president had with James Comey earlier in January, did the president implore him to pledge his loyalty to the president? Is that true?
No.
Did that happen? That did not happen?
No.
How important is it that the FBI director be loyal to the president? Is that a quality the president wants to see in anyone, particularly his FBI director?
I think the president wants loyalty to this country and to the rule of law. Trey.
Thanks, Sean. On the dinner with James Comey, does anyone in this White House have an audio recording of what unfolded during the January 27th dinner between the former FBI director and the President of the United States?
I'm not aware of that.
I have one follow-up question for you. What can the administration do better when it comes to communication? Today, the President tweeted out that he felt from behind that podium it's not always possible to present the information with perfect accuracy.
So, I think we come out here every day and try to do the best job we can communicating what the president's done and the accomplishments he's making on the American people. We get here early. We work beyond being here at this podium. As many of you know, we get here early. We work pretty late. We do what we can, but the president is an activist president. He keeps a very robust schedule, as many of you are very well aware, and as you can tell by the activities of next week alone. And I think sometimes we don't have an opportunity to get in to see him, to get his full thinking. In those cases, we do our best to follow up with you. But I think that there are times when you, more than not, read a story where someone's trying to pull apart one word, one sentence, and say, aha, and make it a gotcha thing. We work very hard to get you the most accurate and up-to-date information throughout the day. We don't always have the opportunity to get in to see the president. And in those cases, I think we do a pretty good job of following up and getting you the information after the briefing or in a subsequent. So that's exactly what he meant.
Is the president considering canceling the daily press briefings?
I think he's a little dismayed, as well as a lot of people, that we come out here and try to do everything we can to provide you and the American people with what he's doing on their behalf, what he's doing to keep the nation safe, what he's doing to grow jobs. And yet we see time and time again an attempt to parse every little word and make it more of a game of gotcha, as opposed to really figure out what the policies are, why something's being pursued, or what the update is on this. And I think that's where there's a lot of dismay, and I don't think it's something that just alone the president feels.
Can I ask you one final logistical question?
It's Friday.
On the original question I had about the dinner on January 27th with James Comey,
Right.
The president wasn't clear during the NBC interview who invited the FBI director to the White House at that time. How many invitations did the White House send to Director James Comey after January 20th and before the director was fired?
I don't know. I'll try to get back to you. Katie.
Thanks, Sean. I have a question about the Turkish president's visit next
Okay.
week. He recently President Erdogan called for Muslims to rush the Temple Mount, considering the president has said he's a mediator for peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. What is his response to that? And then I have another question.
So I think what you've seen with the president's meeting with these leaders is he engages privately in a lot of these things, and I think to a large degree, he's been able to achieve great success, whether Aya Higazi, in that particular case, working behind the scenes, whether it's the progress that he's made with China. The president's behind-the-scenes diplomacy is paying dividends for the United States, and that's how he's going to continue to operate. And as General McMaster noted, it's that kind of diplomacy that's reasserting our position in the world, and that trust and those relationships continue to be built. Well, I think there's a difference, Katie. If we can get out here and I think what the president believes is that behind-the-scenes diplomacy pays dividends in terms of affecting behavior and outcomes and furthering the goals of the United States. So that's as much as I want to say there.
My other question is the discussion about the refugee crisis, which is fueling problems in Europe. The president has talked about refugees being a problem here in the United States and terrorists hiding refugees, or refugees hiding in the terrorists hiding in the refugee stream. Excuse me. Is he going to talk about that with Arab leaders specifically when he visits Saudi Arabia, or is that not something that he's willing to bring up?
to those.
I mean,
those
he's
leaders.
talked about safe zones. He talked about it yesterday with the foreign minister, or earlier this week, rather. He's brought it up on the calls.
But in Saudi Arabia specifically.
I'm not going to get ahead of his conversations that he's going to have, but I think the president's been very publicly clear about his desire to address that situation and some of the solutions that exist. But he's in a lot of the readouts we've had that as part of it because he believes that has to be part of a solution. John.
Thanks so much, Sean. In the interview that the president conducted yesterday with NBC, he indicated and confirmed that on 3 separate occasions, he asked the director of the FBI and received assurances from the FBI that he was not under investigation by the FBI. Why was the president seemingly so consumed by this that he would ask that question on 3 separate occasions?
I think because the narrative continued to be perpetuated, and he wanted clarity to make sure. But again, I haven't spoken to him on it about the reason, but I think he answered it yesterday very clearly, and so I can get back to you. But that's the answer.
I would appreciate you getting back to me. And as far as asking that question, did the president ask the White House counsel whether it would be appropriate to ask such a question, given that it was against generally Justice Department guidelines to indicate whether or not investigations are ongoing against any individual, let alone one at the White House?
I don't know. I will tell you that I know several legal scholars, including Alan Dershowitz and others, have said there was nothing inappropriate about that. Dave.
Counsel to the White House counsel?
I don't know the
asked-
answer.
Okay, thank you.
Dave.
General McMaster mentioned that on the trip, the president's going to be raising the issue of religious persecution, I believe with the Pope. And I wanted to ask you about a case in the last week in Indonesia where a Christian governor in the state of Jakarta was imprisoned for 2 years for blaspheming the Quran. Does the president find that case troubling? Does he plan to say anything in way of
John Gizzi give you this question?
I'm sorry. No.
I don't have any updates on that particular case. I would ask you to check with the State Department. Zeke.
Thanks, Sean. I just want to put a finer point on Jeff's question. I'm hoping you can answer this in a yes or no fashion. Is the President of the United States currently recording conversations taking place in the Oval Office?
I think the point that I made with respect to the tweet is the president has no further comment on this. Cam.
Follow up, then, since you were involved in this on Tuesday night as well, giving a blanket answer saying at the time that it was all him regarding Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Why did you come out with information that was later contradicted by the president 2 days later? Could you explain the TikTok? When were you brought in? Who else was involved? Why were the American people given incorrect information that night?
I don't necessarily believe that that's true, Zeke. There was a decision-making process. The president explained it in the interview process. The bottom line is that the director of the FBI serves the pleasure of the president. The president made a decision to replace him, as he has stated very clearly now publicly. The president is now focused on making sure that he finds a replacement that has the leadership qualities to lead the FBI. That's it, plain and simple. Cam.
Follow up on that real briefly. What you said Tuesday doesn't match what the president was laying out yesterday in his interview. Can you walk through why the discrepancy in terms of whose decision this was?
Well, it's always the president's decision. That's it, final.
Did he take the...
As I mentioned to Zeke, this is ultimately always going to be the president's decision. Everyone who serves at the pleasure of the president, it's ultimately going to be his decision to hire someone, to fire someone. He made a decision, in part based on the recommendation, and he's now focused on making sure that we have a replacement at the FBI to instill the proper leadership they need. Blake.
About the way forward as it relates to who the president might nominate to be the FBI director. Where does that process stand right now? How many people have been interviewed? Does the president hope to wrap this up before he goes overseas?
On the timing, I think as soon as he finds a candidate that fits the qualities that he feels are necessary to lead the FBI, that's the timeline of that. I know that the Department of Justice has begun to create that list, and I believe they're going to, if they haven't already, are going to be starting the process of interviewing people either today or through the weekend. But the president obviously wants to make sure that we've got the right person, and that process is being headed by the Department of Justice.
The other day about how somebody not necessarily being political in that role, if somebody has been a member of Congress, past or present, does that count as an automatic disqualifier as somebody who is?
I have not asked the president but I don't believe that he has stated any sort of in and out. The Department of Justice is screening candidates, and I'm sure that as they feel as though they've got a list of finalists, they'll share that with the president, and he'll make a decision.
Does the president still have the other day, someone asked, does the president have confidence in Andrew McCabe after the testimony on Capitol Hill the other day? Is that still the case? He is the acting director at this moment.
I've not asked him about the deputy. I've not asked him about his. Generally, I don't go through the list of government employees and ask him, so I've not asked him specifically about that. Eamon.
Yesterday, Sarah told us that the president expects that the FBI investigation will be wrapped up with integrity. That's what the White House wants. Today, the president tweeted and called it a witch hunt. How does tweeting and calling it a witch hunt help wrap that investigation up with integrity?
The president, no one wants this done. He wants to know very clearly. There's two pieces of this, right? Which is what was Russia's involvement. The president is obviously very concerned about any entity's attempts to influence the United States election. And that's one investigation. I think the second, this false narrative that we continue to fight every day, that has been debunked by intelligence individuals, members of Congress who've been briefed over and over again, that's where I think he's growingly concerned, as well as a number of American people who are growingly concerned that there is this perpetuated false narrative out there. That's I think, the nut of this.
I talked to a former FBI official today who said that the president's tweet, the implicit threat to former FBI Director James Comey, indicates that the president, in his words, is simply out of control. I'd like to get you to respond to that. Is he?
That's frankly offensive. John.
Thank you, Sean. Two questions about the FBI director selection process. You said the names are coming from the Justice Department right now. Mm-hmm. Is the president consulting with Democratic congressional leaders as well, or Republican congressional leaders on this? Or is he just getting names out of DOJ?
That's a good question. I know that he was, obviously he's going to take input from them. I don't know what specific conversations he's had, so I'd be glad to check on who he's spoken to or maybe speaking to. Anita.
I had
I'm sorry, I forgot you too.
Follow-up question.
I got confused that Dave stole one.
Now, I know that you said you're not disqualifying anyone on this. You also know there has been considerable mention in the last 24 hours of former House Intelligence Committee Chairman Mike Rogers as the new FBI director. Does the president have a meeting planned this weekend with Congressman Rogers?
I'm not aware of anything of that nature on his schedule. But we'll obviously, as you know, we'll put out, if there's a meeting, we'll put it out for you. Right now, there's nothing that I'm aware of on the schedule, but generally we put out the next day schedule later in the evening, and we will do that as well. Kristen.
You already called on
I'm sorry. Thank you. Sorry. Getting a little.
I had a couple questions about the president's remarks to NBC about General Flynn. He said that it wasn't an emergency, or he didn't think it was an emergency, and that's why the dismissal didn't happen right away. So I had a couple questions about that. Why didn't he think it was an emergency? And was it because of the messenger? Was it because information came from Sally Yates, who you called an opponent, I think a political opponent of the president? Or is it because Don McGahn downplayed the situation? Can you explain what he meant by that? And I had a follow-up.
I can't specifically say what he meant by that, but what I can tell you is, again, look at the timeline that happened. We went over this the other day, and this has been asked and answered multiple times. The former acting attorney general came and said, I want to give you a heads up on something. Don McGahn, the counsel's office, informed the president. They asked for the documents or materials that she had referred to. It took, I forgot now, 5 or 6 days to get those. They reviewed them, and he was asked to resign shortly thereafter. But I think that there is a difference. There wasn't a review process. That was the review process in this case. As the president noted yesterday during his interview, he had been thinking about this for a long time. The Justice Department had done a review. But again, I'm not really sure in both cases.
Comey? So then, since you just did.
No, you just asked me. You just asked me what's
justice, though. Is that what you're talking about?
No, what I'm saying is you're asking why it wasn't an emergency. I think, but it's not a question of his emergency. He took the time to do due process. Someone comes to you with an allegation. I think everyone deserves due process to make sure that allegation, someone coming in and giving you a heads up, we did exactly what was necessary, and the president made the right decision, and he continues to stand by it.
Okay, so then two follow-ups. One, why, I'm still unclear, and you've mentioned this several times, why did it take so long for the White House to get those documents?
I don't know. I think we've.
White House asking, you couldn't go get the documents?
That's not, making it sound that is rather, with all due respect, it's not how it works. They're the ones who possess the documents. They had them in their possession. I believe they asked for them, and it took a while.
Because she was fired, though, in between?
No, I think part of it is just there's some of these things don't happen as easily in terms of where they're stored. I don't know the answer, but I think that in the course of action, if you look at the intervening days, that's a question that you should ask the Department of Justice.
Okay, and I sort of had a follow-up.
I'm sure.
Just explain to us then a little bit when you compare these two situations with General Flynn and Director Comey. The memo came one day, and he was fired that day. That was the review process, and General Flynn was 18 days.
No,
That's a huge difference. Why was one so fast when one was 18 days?
Well, I think first of all, they both had a review. They both came, and the president looked at the information and the reviews and made a decision. Ultimately, as I mentioned, that's his job. He's the decider. He felt as though he had the information necessary in both cases to act, and he did. Vivian.
Sean, in the tweet about Director Comey, he said the president says that he better be careful before he goes leaking to the press. Yesterday on NBC News, the president called him a showboat and a grandstander. Does the White House acknowledge that Director Comey has a First Amendment right to speak to the press if he so chooses to set the record straight about any of this, instead of just leaking? It may not be leaking. It may just be his First Amendment right to speak to the press.
Well, everyone in this country has a First Amendment right. I think the difference, and you've heard the president echo this multiple times, is that sharing information that's not meant to be or is not authorized to be in the public domain in terms of the classification of it is concerning. And I think the president's been very clear over and over again of his concern with respect to information that gets put in the public domain that's not meant to be. But I don't think that those are. Everyone in this country has every right to speak their mind and express themselves in accordance with the Constitution.
Okay, and follow up, just in terms of the FBI being in disarray, also with the president's comments, is he concerned that if he continues like this, it could jeopardize morale at the FBI instead of actually kind of correcting a problem that he obviously observes there?
Well, I think that one of the reasons that he wants to go through the process of finding an individual who can lead the FBI and the men and women who serve there so bravely and ably is to make sure that morale and the focus is as it's supposed to be, and that you have a leader that can do that. And you know, as you mentioned, it's the crown jewel of law enforcement. And I think the reason that he wants to go through this process and choose a leader that can be restore leadership, ensure that morale stays where it needs to be, and that there's a focus. That's why he's conducting the process that he has. And so, Jessica.
Can I give my question to Kristen and then take the question back?
What's that?
You called on her first, so I just wanted to give her the question that you promised her before, and then I'll pick up from there.
I'll your question. Thank you. I just want to ask
exchange back there with questions.
I want to ask you, President Trump seemed to rely on James Clapper this morning when he tweeted that virtually he and everyone else with knowledge of the witch hunt says there is no collusion. James Clapper himself today told Andrea Mitchell, I don't know if there was collusion or not. I don't know if there's evidence of collusion or not, nor should I. On March 5th on Meet the Press, when he was asked a similar question, he said, not to my knowledge. So can you describe the discrepancy and explain it?
No. I actually think that that's a great question that you should ask Director Clapper. I think
Between Director Clapper's comments and President Trump, why is he leaning on Clapper when he said, I have no knowledge of whether there was collusion?
No, I think on several occasions, Director Clapper has said that he has no knowledge of any collusion. That's it. I mean, that's the point that he is.
Briefed. He said he wouldn't know because he hasn't been briefed on
He was
the investigation.
DNI up until January 20th.
Today that he said, nor should I have in this particular context. He made the case that he's
Right,
not
and
briefed on an FBI investigation, that's not his purview.
Fair enough. He's the Director of National Intelligence. On multiple occasions prior to today, he made it very clear that he was unaware of any collusion.
The point was he wouldn't know,
Well,
right?
but then-
There had been no final conclusion.
Right, I understand.
There had been no final conclusion.
I understand
And
that, but
the
then,
president seemed to indicate that
so
there
the
was
question that I would ask then, Kristen, is then why did he say what he said before? It seems his testimony and comments on multiple occasions prior to today was, I have no evidence that there was any collusion, right? So to suddenly today shift his story, I believe that the question should be asked to him. You are the Director of National Intelligence. You said multiple times, including in testimony in front of Congress, under oath, that there was no collusion. I believe that that's a question for him.
Final conclusion made about this investigation, right? There's an ongoing investigation. He's not making that argument, is he?
I understand, but my point is that all we're able to do at this point is that the people who are aware of the former director of national intelligence, the head of the nation's agencies, intelligence agencies, makes multiple statements, as others, Charles, Senator Grassley and others, talking about the involvement, making it very clear that there was none. We took him at their word then, and we continue to believe.
But I want to move on to just one other
I think
question.
but the question, Kristen, before you move on, is then why did he make the statements that he did when he did? To turn around now, months later, and say, well, even though I made those comments on multiple occasions, I wasn't briefed. I appreciate.
Comments today, it's not surprising or abnormal that I would not have known about the investigation.
Yeah, it sounds like the story has changed.
Or the context of the investigation.
Okay, well, ultimately, there's been several.
Very quickly about the accuracy.
Do you mind if I think in this case, it is interesting how the story has changed. He made those comments several times over several courses of action. And to say that the Director of National Intelligence, who stated unequivocally what his position was on multiple occasions before today, and now suddenly is saying, I wasn't sure about it, that the burden seems to be on him, not us.
But moving on to the accuracy.
Like a Clapper spokesman job.
No, but I just am interested in the discrepancy in drawing a final
And I think that that's a great thing to ask him.
No, on the part of the president. Drawing a final conclusion about the investigation. In terms of the accuracy tweet, should we take that tweet to mean that you don't have the full picture when you stand at that podium?
As I said, we come up here every day, not just to the podium, but we are here first thing in the morning till late at night every day, answering your questions on a variety of subjects and throughout issues that are happening in the government. We, as most of you can attest, work day and night to make sure that we get you the most up-to-date, accurate information at all times. With respect to the president, as I mentioned, he's an activist president. He keeps an unbelievably busy and robust schedule. And there are times when we give you the information that we have at the time and we seek to get an update. And I believe that you and others will attest to when we don't have an answer, we try really hard to either update you after the fact or to get you the facts that we didn't have at the time. But we work really hard every day to do that. And I think the president's point that I pointed out earlier is that there are times when we're asked a question, we do our best to give you the answer, and every word is picked apart to try to figure out how to make an issue out of it, as opposed to allowing us to, talk to the president, get his current thinking and updates if we hadn't had an opportunity to do that at this time. Jennifer.
Can I, Sean, can I actually pick
I'm
up
sorry,
there?
Jessica,
Don't mind.
then
Thank
we'll
you
do
so
the
much.
J's.
So I wanted to ask you about the One Belt, One Road Summit that
Mhm.
starts on Sunday in
Yes.
China. You announced yesterday, or I should
Sarah.
say Secretary Ross did, that you're going to send a delegation to that summit.
Yeah.
Can you talk about how you came to that conclusion, why it's important for the U.S. to be represented at what's ostensibly a major trade initiative by a foreign country?
As you point, it's a major trade initiative. There's a lot of ports and infrastructure that they're looking to do, and through those discussions that Secretary Ross and Secretary Mnuchin and others had at Mar-a-Lago, and part of this is that is something that they've done. We're going to continue to work with them. Obviously, trade is a major issue for us, and what they're looking to do is of great importance to our economic and national security, and they've asked us to send people to that, and we have them attend things that we're doing as well. And I think that's, as the president has shown, in terms of the relationship that he's built with President Xi and the rest of the team built with their delegation, those relationships are clearly paying dividends both on the national security front and on the economic front. Jennifer.
Signal that the U.S. is going to participate in the One Belt, One Road initiative?
We'll have a readout. At this point, that's all we have on One Belt, One Road.
Two questions. The first one on loyalty and the next one on the visit to the FBI headquarters. So this president does value loyalty. Was there any sort of, before you were hired, any sort of request or hint that you pledged personal loyalty to him at all before you were hired?
No. I've pledged my loyalty to the Constitution and to the American people, as has everyone who serves in our government and this administration, and we stand by that.
The president was warned that he might not be well received at the FBI headquarters if you were to visit.
I don't, not that I'm aware of. Thank you guys. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Thank you.
Welcome back. That was the press briefing with Sean Spicer. This is the post show
of the press briefing with Sean Spicer, which we do after every briefing here at Right Side Broadcasting. We're going to talk about what was said during the briefing today, take your comments and take your questions, and a lot of interesting stuff in the briefing today. A lot of focus on the tweets, as we knew there would be. So we're going to talk about it, but I'd love to get your feedback about what went on today. So if you want to write in, you can write to me at Lookner on Twitter, at Lookner, or email me, steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. I will read your comment on the air, as long as it's clean. And Jake, are we taking phone calls today or no? And you can even call in if you'd like and give your view about the briefing, 202-470-0049. So give a shout. I want to hear what you think. Speaking of which, some people wrote me already, and I want to get to their comments about the briefing. Let's see. Andrew Sova says, Donald Trump must have told him something. He kept on refusing to answer dumb questions. So you think he was under instruction from President Trump to not answer certain questions. Thank you, Andrew. Let's see. Dot Nika Rambe says, I hope I didn't read something bad there. So I might avoid reading that name again, but it's anyways, RSBN shows the crowd. Thank you. Do you think Spicer is on his way out? You don't have to say my name on air. I know it's not acceptable. I think I know what your name is supposed to be, so I said it wrong, but I won't say it the way I think it's supposed to be said. Anyways, thank you for writing in. As to whether Spicer's on his way out, well, there had been some speculation going on about that because he'd been away for a week. He's back today. Can't tell. You know, somebody might say, well, they had Sarah Sanders do 3 briefings in a row, so maybe he is. But you never know. Maybe he wants to leave eventually. Don't know. So I have no insight on this. But thank you for asking. William Heritage says, how are the hacks being placed on a computer or system? We're going to talk about the hacking story in a second, William. So thank you for your question on that. A new kind of important hacking story is coming out today, or came out today, very recently. Want to talk about that. No to the Mark says, replace the chairs with monitors and have reporters on the street Skype into the press briefing room. They are all useless at the moment. And I think Ken Conway wrote in. Hey, Steve, I saw where Trump has now mentioned possibly getting rid of the daily press briefings. I think he's getting fed up with their dishonesty, hostility, hatred, and attempts to undermine the administration. They are using the national stage of the briefings to do this. The fake stream media needs a wake-up call. What do you think about the possibility of Trump filing a lawsuit against some of them for slander? Some of the blatant false reports are intended to do damage. Just a thought. Thanks again, Ken. So, I mean, President Trump, like all Americans, has the right to file a lawsuit for slander if he thinks he's been slandered. Although it's possible that, I don't know if it makes it different that he's a public figure than a private figure. I think there might be legal differences there. Also, you know, if you're going to sue somebody for slander, you have to prove what they said is not true. So, like, if somebody slanders me, if I have to go to court and show, I believe I have to show that what they said is not true. But if you're the president and then somebody slanders you, you think they're saying something that's not true, it might be hard for you to prove that what they're saying is not true because maybe you'd have to reveal classified information or something which you're not allowed to do. So there's all these, it's an interesting question about can presidents sue for slander or what's involved in that. I don't know all the legal subtleties, but it probably, I'm guessing it wouldn't happen for a number of different reasons. Also, it might make the president look bad. So it might not happen unless it was like a real extreme case of it. You know, like if a newspaper tomorrow, if the Daily Briefing or what the Daily Press, the Milwaukee Journal, Sentinel Journal said tomorrow, President Trump abuses animals, and it wasn't true, I'm guessing at that point you might see a lawsuit. But thank you for the question, Ken. Oh, cool. So we have a call from Mike right now. Hello, Mike. Where are you calling from?
Hey, Steve. I'm from Philly.
Great, Mike. So what did you want to talk about on the show today?
I just think it's really interesting with Trump's tweet about getting rid of the press briefings, and I'm just trying to hash out like how that could be possible. I saw earlier, I was watching Alex Jones, and he was saying something about having like a bi-weekly address or something where he like does basically presentations to the nation. Alex said, like, in a Glenn Beck style way with chalkboards and charts and, you know, just kind of put your ideas out on paper. I'm wondering if that's possible, because the way the press briefing works, it's just terrible.
So I think it's a good question, Mike. What would they do if they didn't have a press briefing? I mean, there's certainly a lot. They can do whatever they want legally. They don't have to have a press briefing. I'm sure they'd want to do something. So one suggestion you talked about is the suggestion of having kind of like, you know, weekly or bi-weekly things where you just address the people. Another suggestion one of our viewers had was maybe they could do a thing where they take questions from the press like at the beginning of the day, and then they send like an email or a document out at the end of the day answering all the questions. They just do it all in writing and not having an actual person do it. So that could be an option too. Really, it's up to them what option is. Now, I will say if they cancel the press briefing, there's going to be some outcry about it, and they're going to have to explain it. But it sounds like you think you're not a big fan of the press briefings and don't think they're that great the way they've been going. Correct?
I am a fan, but and this administration's been doing a really good job with getting more voices in there. What I'm not a fan of is kind of the mainstream just pushing these talking points and kind of attacking the president in the press briefing. It's like the degree of journalism in this country has gotten so low that it's just infuriating. Like, and I feel like I like that he's allowing new media in, but I feel like they need to be pushed more to the forefront, and kind of the old dinosaurs need to like be pushed to the back.
And that's a possibility too, Mike. I mean, another one of our viewers was wondering about might they just change who gets to sit in the front or change who's there. And I understand your concern about the briefings. Like you say, you like the idea of it. I mean, generally, I do think it's a good idea that any administration answers questions from the press. But a frustration I have is that I feel like they focus so much on, say, like a single or a couple of tweets, and like there's so many stories. I mean, there's a big hacking story that just came out today. There's a big cyber attack going on in England today, and actually it might be spreading to the U.S. And the New York Times actually reported in the last hour that this cyber attack is being done with tools that were originally developed by the NSA. I would have loved to have seen that discussed in the press briefing. I would have loved to have seen more of North Korea, the health bill, tax policy, but all this.
There's so much going on.
Exactly, they focus on stuff. So I'm sympathetic with your view. So I appreciate you bringing it up, Mike. And like you said, President Trump tweeted about it. Maybe he won't cancel them, but maybe we'll see a change. So we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, and Sean kind of brought it up too, where he said like they harp on like one single word that they said. It's just, I don't know. I think a lot of people in America are getting frustrated with the media. I mean, the approval ratings say as much, and I just wish there was a better way of doing it. I support free press, but they've kind of been abusing their power, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and I think somebody can make a legitimate complaint that, like, look, they can ask about this stuff. You're not saying, you don't have to say they shouldn't ask about it, but you can ask about something once or twice and not have to ask about it 10 times. But the briefings, the latest briefings have been really seem to be focused on one or two topics. So I agree with you. I would like them to focus on more topics than they do. We'll see what happens coming in the future. But appreciate the call, Mike, very much. Thanks.
Yeah, man. Thanks for all you do.
Thanks so much. That was Mike from Philly. I think Mike, I thought Mike had a very intelligent perspective, and Mike was saying, he's not against press briefings in general, and he's not against the press asking questions in general. He feels that the way they're going right now, he feels is not the most beneficial thing for the country. So thank you, Mike, for calling in. This is the post show for the Sean Spicer press briefing. We are here. We're taking your comments, your questions, your calls. If you'd like to write in, I'll read your comment on the air. You can reach me at Lookner on Twitter, at LOOKNER. You can email me at steve.lookner@rsbn.tv. You can call me at 202-470-0049. Let me quickly say, if you enjoy this coverage, if you enjoy that we do a pre and post show for the Spicer press briefings and let you get your opinion out there, I hope you consider donating, because we rely on your donations to stay on the air. We are largely viewer supported. We couldn't stay on the air without you. If you'd like to donate, you can go to rsbn.tv/donate. That's rsbn.tv/donate. Or you can go to the YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube, you can go to the chat room right next to the broadcast and click the $ at the bottom of the chat room. And what else was I going to mention? Oh, I wanted to briefly just talk about this story. You might not have even heard it, but this came out. Okay, let's get to Ryan's call first. We have Ryan calling in, and then we'll talk about the hacking story. Ryan, hello. How are you doing today?
Hey, very good, buddy.
So what you want? So what was on your mind today, Ryan?
I'm just so depressed. When you look at the mainstream media and the questions that they're asking with all of the news that's out there, it's just so blatantly, it's just against the democracy in the sense of, for voting to work, you need to be an informed voter. And, you know, I'm wondering, when are we going to do an investigation with the media colluding with a political party to affect an election outcome? I mean, this is ridiculous. I mean, I understand Russia does it. That's they're our competition, but our media is supposed to be worried about the country itself.
So it sounds to me, Ryan, that you also, like Mike, you're not opposed to press briefings in general. You just feel like the press briefings now, you're not, the way they're going is not the best thing for the country, and they could be done a lot better. Are you upset that they're focusing on like a couple things and they just ask all those questions about those things?
It's so clear that they all have a certain narrative that they're pursuing. Here's a couple of examples. So I heard one media outlet claim that Bernie Sanders' wife is under federal investigation by the FBI for college fraud. Like, why is that? Is that true? Why would the FBI leak that if it's a pending investigation? Nobody's covering that. Where's the $500 billion that's missing from our government from HUD? Nobody cares. This whole investigation leaking, unmasking, New York Times isn't pursuing that story. They're so selective in their outrage. It's just depressing.
You know, I've seen also a number of people, as to your point about them being selective, I've seen a bunch of people upset on Twitter over the last couple of days saying like, hey, nobody ever covered Trump does something, and you know, there's all this like Trump-Russia innuendo, and that gets covered so much. But like, you know, when Hillary Clinton has, you know, all these emails on her private home server, the same press that's covering the same press that's obsessing with Trump and Russia connections, even though there's like no evidence been released for that, wasn't obsessing over whether Hillary was up to something no good, even though there was evidence of she had a home server, she kept all these emails there, she deleted them, and a bunch of people are upset that they feel the coverage is very selective there. I'm sorry, Ryan, continue.
Investigating her is gotten campaign donations via his wife. I mean, why isn't that a New York Times story? I mean, that's a conflict. You've got a horse in the race.
And you're talking about with McCabe, who's now the acting director of the FBI, that the fact that his wife was running for Congress, and then after the Hillary investigation was announced, friends of Hillary Clinton gave her like $685,000 or something in campaign contributions.
After he got promoted to run the investigation, and after the FBI said that they were investigating her, 98% of the campaign contributions came after the fact that he was in a position of power. And you're telling me that is ethical and nobody cares about that? I mean, no major media is pursuing that. Here's the last thing I want to leave you with. So, WikiLeaks, the hack that happened today. 2 months ago, WikiLeaks came out and said the NSA has lost their hacking arsenal, and nobody reported it. So today we have people in hospitals that could be dying because of this crisis. So tell me, is WikiLeaks helping our national security by disclosing this to the public so that we can start to fix it? That's a big deal.
And Mike, it's an excellent point you're making. It was an exact point I was going to make on the show, and I'm going to make after this call about how this thing. Some people might think that the attack today actually just like It's just what WikiLeaks was talking about a couple months ago when they released. I want to say, I'm not sure. I was thinking maybe it was from the CIA. I can't remember if it was CIA or NSA that they released a bunch of. A couple months ago, the WikiLeaks said we got this big bunch of documents from the CIA. It's and a big bunch of their cyber weapons, and we're going to start releasing this stuff. And the reason they said they're going to release it is that they said one of the reasons they said is like, look, the CIA develops these cyber weapons, and they don't tell anyone they're doing it, so companies can't prepare to fight them. And then bad people could get a hold of these things that are developed by the government and use them for nefarious purposes. And that seems to be precisely what has happened today, because these cyber attacks today, reported by the New York Times, were done with technology that the NSA originally developed. So it seems, I agree. I think it's a very good point, Ryan, that this is exactly what the WikiLeaks was talking about a couple months ago. And you're saying,
But
hey,
why would
doesn't
no
it seem to me
media
that
cover
WikiLeaks is
that?
actually trying to help our security rather than hurt it?
Yeah, why wouldn't the media raise alarm and hold the administration accountable, saying, did you guys just lose all this stuff? I mean, Apple, Google, all of them got put on notice 2 months ago. Have they done anything to fix these backdoor? Nothing. It's just pushed under the rug, and they're just going after the messenger. Going after Assange is simply shooting the messenger because you don't like the message. And we have to realize that he is part of the drain to the swamp to say, hey, accountability and transparency starts now.
Well, Mike, I'm glad you brought up the hacking thing, because I think it's an important story, and always appreciate you calling in and your perspective on things. So thanks so much for calling today.
Hey, thanks so much, buddy. Keep it up.
Thanks, Ryan. So that was Ryan, and Ryan, I want to say a little more about this hacking story that came up, Oh, that's awesome. The one, the New York Times one from today. So basically today there was a giant cyber hack or cyber attack in a number of places, but one place it really affected was the National Health Service of England, which treats over like 90% of the people in England use that for their health care. And a number of hospitals and I believe other institutions involved with the National Health Service, they couldn't use their computers today because they got this ransomware message saying we've frozen all your files and you don't have access to them anymore and you have to pay $300. I misspoke earlier. I thought it was 300 Bitcoins. It was $300 in Bitcoin. But it's $300 in Bitcoin. You have to pay $300 to get access to your files. And I'm not sure if this was like $300 for each computer or $300 for each hospital or something. Don't know. But anyways, there was this ransomware and all these hospitals couldn't use their computers. I heard they couldn't use some of their phones, and that would make sense, especially if they had internet phones. But as Ryan said, people couldn't get care in a number of places in England, and Ryan was saying, maybe people died or had significant health issues due to not being able to get care today. And a number of hospitals weren't treating the people they would normally be treating today in England. And that happened, and I just saw a report, I tweeted it out about 10, 15 minutes ago, saying that I've seen reports that this same hack has been going on not just in English hospitals today, but also companies in Spain. And I saw a tweet sent out, I retweeted about 15 minutes ago, I think it was Breaking N Live, where they said, we've had reports of we've had reports of this attack spreading, and they showed a map of where it was spreading to, and their map had a couple locations in the US and some other countries. And this story came out in the New York Times just in the last hour, and the headline is cyber attacks in 12 nations said to use leaked NSA hacking tool. And I'm reading from the New York Times now. The hacking tool was, sorry, let me go back. I accidentally clicked off of it. According to security experts, it exploited a vulnerability that was discovered and developed by the National Security Agency. The hacking tool was leaked by a group which had been dumping stolen NSA hacking tools online beginning last year. So this hack would not have been possible without the NSA developing this technology used in the hack. And Ryan made, I think, the insightful point that this relates to what WikiLeaks was talking about a couple months ago. So a couple months ago, WikiLeaks, to repeat a bit of what I said before, they released a big bunch of documents And they said they had way more than this. This was like the first part of it. But they said, what they said is they said, we've gotten a big leak from the CIA. It includes documents. It includes actual like computer files that are cyber weapons. So they got access to a lot of these cyber weapons that the CIA had been developing. And what they said is, they released a big document where they said, well, here's why we're releasing this stuff, and we're going to start releasing this stuff. But one thing they really emphasized is they said, look, what the CIA and apparently, and I'm sure the NSA does, is they develop these cyber tools and cyber weapons. And part of what they do is they look at common programs, like Windows and like, I want to say like iPhone operating systems and stuff. In their leak, I think, they said they had cyber weapons. They had access to cyber weapons that had been developed for all this very common technology. I believe they said Windows. I believe they said Android and iPhones and all these very common technologies. And what they said they do is the CIA, presumably the NSA as well, they find out vulnerabilities in software, in this very, very popular software, operating systems and popular software. They find out vulnerabilities that the companies themselves don't even know exist. Like no one except the CIA has figured out that these vulnerabilities exist. And they're called zero-day vulnerabilities. And the reason they're called that is it means that there's 0 days to prepare for an attack based on them because no one knows these vulnerabilities exist. So for example, the CIA might find that in Android, there's this way you can sneak into Android and manipulate things and do bad things in there and spy on people or something like that, or destroy the machine or whatever. And no one knows about this, so there's no way to prepare for an attack with this cyber weapon. And the problem is that what WikiLeaks said is the problem is this is very dangerous because this leak, they said, showed that the CIA doesn't have security control over their cyber weapons and they can't prevent their cyber weapons from getting out. And there's lots of people out there who would pay tons of money for them, say a state like North Korea or something, would pay tons of money for these cyber weapons, and all it takes is for the right person to let them get out. So, and so WikiLeaks said, like, we've gotten this stuff. So that shows that this stuff can get out there into the public. And they said, look, it's so dangerous to be developing these cyber weapons, these zero-day cyber weapons for which nobody knows about, because if they get in the wrong hands, somebody could launch an attack with them, and there's no fix for it immediately because no one even knew the vulnerability existed. And today, it seems like, I don't know if this was a zero-day weapon, but this is the general idea of the danger WikiLeaks was talking about a couple months ago, which was you have NSA, if the New York Times report is accurate, you have NSA technology, which was stolen. It's stolen NSA hacking tools. It was stolen by nefarious people, and they have used it to do a giant cyber attack today, a large part of it on hospitals. And let me say this. This is one of these cases where you should, like the importance of the story is not reflected in the mainstream media coverage. If this same story was going on in America right now, let's say instead of British hospitals, it was American hospitals today, and it came out that an NSA tool, cyber weapon, was being used to hack American hospitals, and American hospitals were closing today. Can you imagine what a giant story this would be? This would be a national crisis. And yet, because it's happening in England and not happening here, you barely hear about it on the news. It wasn't asked about in the press briefing at all, but it could easily be happening here. So it really is, to me, a giant story, and there's no reason I see why a similar attack couldn't happen in the United States. So I think it's a really important story, and it's a story. Now, maybe it came out too late to be asked about in the press briefing, but I was reading about it during the press briefing. So it's, to me, in a world in which people aren't obsessing over the two little things they were asking, the Comey stuff, and I'm not saying that stuff shouldn't be asked about, but it's asked about again and again and again and again. If people weren't obsessing about that all the time, asking about that stuff all the time, maybe somebody in that room, maybe somebody who works for the New York Times, whose paper came out with this article, would look at their iPhone and say, oh, wow, look at this story. NSA tools are being used in this giant hack today. Maybe I should try to ask a question about it. But, and maybe somebody had their hand up and didn't get called on, but I didn't hear any questions about it being asked. So, kind of frustrating. Anyways, we are going to take some more calls and comments. Hold on, I need a drink of water. And let me just say again quickly, we're going to take a call in 1 second, but if you enjoy our coverage, hope you consider donating because we rely on viewer support to stay on the air. You can donate to Right Side at rsbn.tv/donate, or you can click the $ on the YouTube chat going on at the next to the broadcast. There's a $ at the bottom of the chat window. Thanks to the moderators for moderating the chat today. Appreciate it. We have Edward on the line. Hello, Edward. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Atlanta, Georgia.
Great. Thanks, Edward. So what do you want to talk about today?
Well, first, I want to say I really appreciate Right Side Broadcasting. I mean, throughout the whole entire election campaign, you guys have brought every single speech of Donald Trump, and it was kind of like you drink like caffeine all the time, and then you get the caffeine away, you get kind of jittery and stuff like that, and then like once Trump became president, couldn't see him as often anymore, so, but I just want to say thank you guys for that.
You're welcome. Thank you for saying that. And I originally started watching Right Side when I was watching the rallies too, and I do remember during the campaign sometimes, Jake, am I right that he used to do 3 rallies a day sometimes?
Near the end, yes, sometimes 4 or 5.
Amazing. So yeah, you're right, Edward. You could just sit there and watch it all day and see him go to different cities and stuff. So, but thank you for watching, and those words you said were very nice, so we appreciate it. We do it for you, so glad you're enjoying it.
Now, I'm really pissed at the press conference because they are literally, it's like every single press conference is combative, is crazy. Sean Spicer, what he should do is he should just do the normal briefings and just do Skype the whole hour. Skype, and then keep doing it to teach these guys a lesson, because they can't just keep rolling over Sean and Sarah Huckabee, constantly like this, because it's very demoralizing. I'm listening to Sean Spicer's voice. He doesn't sound like he wants to be there. He sounds like he's demoralized. And it's up to him to push back on this, and that's how you push back. Is just keep running the Skype.
And so now it's an interesting suggestion, Edward. So when you say Skype, you're saying Skype in other journalists by the ones that are aside from the ones that are in the room from alternate media sources and let them ask questions. You're saying.
Well, Sean Spicer. I think that was a beautiful thing that he did. Is once a week he allows three Skypes to ask questions and stuff. Well, he should do one where it's nothing but Skype, because it's like, this is a big news today about the economy. 28 years, the lowest unemployment rate, with people requesting unemployment insurance is the lowest in 28 years. This should be the headline. And they keep asking, Mike Flynn is 3-month-old talk. These are just very old stuff. And then, there's also another story about, I think it was Indonesia. Prime Minister is saying that Hillary Clinton, when she was state secretary, was pressuring her to donate to the foundation. Those should be stories that should be reported. But they constantly want to badger, not just Trump, but just the press secretary. And they keep asking the same question, and, a pretzel mind way that you have to kind of wind the answer out. It's just, they're constantly asking questions and wording them in a way to get these guys to trip up. And that's not, newsworthy. That's combative. That's ridiculous. They need to get spanked, and that's how you spank them.
Well, Edward, I have a lot of sympathy for your view, and I've said before, I wish there would be more of a range of topics talked about in the briefing, and they can ask questions about whatever they want, but it's you could ask a couple of questions about the taping stuff and move on, but they seem to be really, at the last, like you said, the last few briefings, it's been really focused on just very narrow things. And also, I think I like the point you made about like the general vibe in there being unpleasant. Like, to me, the last couple ones, like, it feels like it's like if you have a couple friends or a couple you know and they fight all the time, you just don't want to be around it anymore because it's like a toxic environment. To me, like, the last couple briefings, it's been kind of an unpleasant experience watching them. It's like, it's not, like you said, Sean Spicer didn't seem like he was too happy today, and it's like, it's not a very happy room, and it's getting like to be a weird vibe in there. And it's, so I hope it improves because I don't want it to keep being like that the whole time.
I seriously doubt that it's going to improve. I really think with the firing James Comey, it's going to push to indictments and to grand juries and to the whole. I mean, because the whole Clinton situation has to be reopened up again. And I think Trump is also going to get to the bottom of the classified information, and because James Comey wasn't even investigating any of it. He was just talking about it. But now they're freaking out because if they are responsible for having the information leaked, then they're culpable to the punishment, to the crime as well. It isn't just the leaker; it's them as well.
Well, we'll have to see what happens. Will the Clinton case be reopened? Will we see any charges on leaking or anything? Who knows? It's very possible, so we'll just have to see. So, but we'll see what happens. I hope for viewers like you, Edward, that the briefings get better to watch. I know you're pessimistic, but you never know. We'll see what happens. Really appreciate you calling in today, though.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate Right Side Broadcasting, and I love the music.
Thanks so much. Oh, well, Jake is here right now. So, Jake, he said he loves the music. Jake does the music.
Thank you, Edward. Appreciate that.
Awesome.
That song, New Beginning, I think that song should be nicknamed the Trump song, because that New Beginning song is unbelievable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I actually, just real quickly, not to make this about me, I did write that actually as sort of an American Dreamer version too, and it actually became what I was trying to make it as the unofficial version of Pence's theme, so that he would have something in contrast with Trump having American Dreamer. So I'm glad you enjoyed that. That seems to be a popular one. I appreciate that.
Thanks. You guys have a good day, okay?
Thanks, Edward. Hey, Jake, can you play a little of New Beginning? Do you have that queued up there so people know what song you're talking about? Because some people don't know the titles of the songs. We'll let you hear a little of Jake's New Beginning song. It is a good one. I do like New Beginning a lot. Now, Jake, I can't hear it, so let me know if it's playing. Okay. I really like this one, Jake. Hey, Jake, if people like your music and they want to purchase it, where can they go?
Oops, sorry, had to get off the mic there. A lot of sound going on in here. Oh, I'm hitting all the buttons. I produced this by myself, so rsbnmusic.bandcamp.com. It's also in the ticker there as well.
Okay,
working
cool.
working on the 4th volume.
Great, awesome. Thank you, Jake. Okay, yeah, we got to go. We have about 10 minutes, so we're going to get off the air. So I want to get to some of your comments that you wrote in. Let's see. Okay, Coconuts wrote in before the briefing. He wrote, "Sean is back. Oh boy, I wonder what the media is going to focus on." I think your prediction probably was right, Coconuts. Llama X writes in, "Regarding press briefing, no other country have daily press briefing. Do it once a week or just send in a written statement, or don't televise it, and do it in the Eisenhower building, in the press out of the West Wing." So you have different suggestions for this. You're saying, I'm not sure, I haven't heard the no other country thing. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm not aware of how other countries do it. But you're saying do it once a week or just send in written statements, presumably get written answers, or don't televise it and do it in the Eisenhower building, which is, I believe, a bigger building, and get the press out of the West Wing. Llama X, you never know, Llama X. there could be some changes to it. President Trump talked about doing the press briefings differently at the start of the administration, talked about moving them to a different location. If the briefings keep going the way they are, I'm not, and also let me say, again, today he tweeted about maybe not having them. So I wouldn't be surprised if at some point the briefing structure changes in somehow. America First says of the briefing, not a single relevant question. These press briefings need to end because all they're used for is slandering the president and his team. Thanks, America First, for writing in. Candy Ogburn writes in, I think Spicer should make and ask the. Spicer should ask. I think Spicer should ask the Indian dude all the questions. All the questions every day would make, or I think for a given day. Anyways, you're talking about the Indian reporter who's once in a while asks a question. That's what Candy is saying. She says, would make my year. But seriously, I like the fact that Spicer said Trump was going to basically kick the mainstream media out of the White House. They need a wake-up call. Woo, love you, Steve. Great job. Thank you, Candy. I want to point out one thing that a lot of the press was talking about. So there was this interesting moment in the briefing where Sean Spicer was asked directly, does President Trump tape his White House conversations? And he didn't deny it. He said, I want to say I have nothing more to say on that, or I have the actual quote here. Let's see, where is it? Let me pull it up here. The actual quote was, hold on. The president has nothing further to add on that. Now, there's a couple ways of reading this. One way you can read is like, oh, they're taping conversations and he wants to, he doesn't want to deny it because denying it would be untrue. I wonder, this might be like crazy talk, but I wonder, is there a world in which he doesn't tape conversations, but he doesn't want to deny it because the administration thinks, oh, it's not the worst thing to have people thinking that it might be conversation tapes because then they won't want to put false information out about the White House. I don't know. I was just thinking about this. So that, by the way, that part of the White House of the briefing you're going to be hearing a lot about in the media, I'm sure, all day today. Let's see. There were some other things. There was another. Oh yeah. So there was another interesting point at the start where he was asked. What was the one he was asked about several times, and he kept saying the president has nothing further to add? The taping got asked about a bunch, and the first few times, I think 3 times he was asked about the taping conversations, the Sean Spicer said the president has nothing further to add on that, and they asked him about that a bunch of times. And he was asked about Trump's tweet warning Comey not to leak, whether that was a threat. And I think one of the press said it was a threat to Comey, and Spicer said that's not a threat. He's simply stating a fact. Another interesting point was when there was a question about something to do with the accuracy of the. Well, President Trump tweeted today like something implying that his. Let me pull up the tweet here. Let me get you the exact tweet. Sorry, I don't want to I can just pull it up. Here we go. He tweeted out, a very active president with lots of things happening. It is not possible for my surrogates to stand at podium with perfect accuracy. So he was asked, Sean Spicer was asked about that claim by a tweet by President Trump that the spokespeople couldn't always speak with perfect accuracy. And what he said in response, explaining that was, Trump is busy and sometimes we don't get an opportunity to see him to get his full thinking. And I'm guessing there will be some people who are critical of that statement by Sean Spicer today. Okay, let me just make sure. I want to get to all your comments that you've sent in. Catch up here. Mid-American says, it would be gullible to think that you're not somehow recorded/logged while speaking with the president. I think maybe, so do you mean like, I think Mid-American, you might mean like it'd be naive to think this. I think that's the point you're making. Correct me if I'm wrong, but thank you, Mid-American. Mid-American has a message for Jake. He says, needs more cowbell. I guess he's talking about He's joking about the song New Beginning. Mid-American, also you wrote in, the ransomware demands are for payment per machine. Recently, LA Valley College paid $30,000 to get their files unlocked. So from what you've heard, Mid-American, you think the ransomware demands for the $300 demand is per machine at those hospitals in England today. And you also say of the press briefing, they want to demoralize Trump surrogates. If Spicer or another in the administration resigned, it would be Trump administration in chaos for a week. Richard P., good question you asked, Richard P. So what happened to the Skype access to the Sean Spicer press briefings? No idea. They did it for like the first few weeks of this press briefings. They would have a Skype question here and there. I did see they were having like kind of weird technical difficulties sometimes with them, so maybe they're working on that, but I don't know what happened to them. Good question, Richard P. And let's see if make sure I've caught up here. Carl Pearson says, first time to hear you today. Glad you're watching, Carl Pearson. Welcome to the show. Amazing that each outlet of the mainstream media asks the same questions using the same words. Agenda is obvious. Socialist commies. Thank you, Carl, for writing in. John Crilly says, I know it's wrong, but as an American IT worker, I shed no tears today for the cyber hacking overseas, apparently. Although, John, we've been hearing some reports that some of these cyber attacks might be going on in the U.S., so we'll see how much of that happens. Fred Dupuis writes, the Russian interference investigation is still ongoing, correct? Yes. Comey got fired, but that had nothing to do with the Russian interference investigation stopping in the FBI. There's also investigations going on in Congress. Senate Intelligence Committee, I know, is doing one. But those are going on as they were before. Thanks for writing in, Fred. Josh writes in, it's observed as what privilege and liberty the press has, and they have turned it into entertainment instead of pertinent info at CNN. So, Josh, you think that the press is focusing their questions on what questions have entertainment value and not what's the most pertinent info for the Americans to know. Thanks, Josh, for writing in. Jerry Mizak writes in, Trump should build his larger press room and let in the real media from here on the internet. They will, she says they will be and moan anyway. The mainstream media, you're saying. Thanks, Jerry. Gas House Gang said Spicer had been on Navy reserves. That's why he missed. So Gas House Gang, that is why it was reported that he missed. The thought I had, though, is just, it seemed like perhaps, they said he was on Navy Reserve, and I don't doubt that he was on Navy Reserve, but at the same time, maybe I don't know the details of the whole Navy Reserve thing and how long he was on for and blah, 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 but you could in theory see that maybe they were trying out Sarah Huckabee and giving her 3 press briefings in a row. Maybe Sean Spicer said he wants to go do something else. I don't know. It just seemed uncommon to me that you all of a sudden have somebody having 3 press briefings in a row. And also it was like originally, she was doing one and then she was doing more than one, and it didn't seem to be like, it wasn't announced that she was doing a week of them. So anyways, it felt like a reasonable question somebody could ask, like, hey, does this mean that maybe Sarah Sanders is going to replace him or they're going to do a tandem thing? Don't know. So that's why I was bringing it up. But yes, he was on Navy reserves. That was the report. MRE Peanut Butter said Spicer had to come back early. He was on Navy Reserve duty as a commander. So you think he had to come back early? I don't know, because Sarah Sanders said she was going to be around all week, and then she was originally announced on the White House website as the one doing the press briefing today, and then they changed it this morning. So I wonder if they brought Sean Spicer back because they felt like we need him here today. No to the Mark says, remember the days when press corps asked Bill Clinton, boxers or shorts? Today it's, what did Trump's tweet mean? The rare Pepe Merchant says, the fake news media is going to be fuming over Sean Spicer not answering about the tapes. Can't wait to hear the whining on CNN. No to the Mark said there would be no pressers if not for Twitter. William Heritage, you want to know how the hacks were being placed on the computer or systems, the cyber attacks going on today. I'm not a computer expert, so I don't know this, but the report from the New York Times, again, was that they were using some kind of vulnerability that was originally, some kind of technology was being used in the hacks that was originally developed by the NSA and then was stolen from the NSA. Okay, we have a couple more minutes here. I'm going to wrap it up. Last couple comments I'm going to read, and then we're going to be finished. Let's see. Deplorable Cat Smith says, and how about all those dead bodies who were supposed to testify against her? Try protecting them next time you have a witness on Hillary. That was Deplorable Cat Smith. Pete Tudsbury writes in, the NHS was also hit by an attack in January. Let's see here. Solomon's Temple write-in, missed the briefing. Did anyone ask about China opening its borders to U.S. companies and reducing trade deficit, or was it all Russians are coming? Well, Sean Spicer did mention at the beginning, he mentioned on his own the China story opening its borders to U.S. companies and reducing trade deficit, but that wasn't asked about in the briefing as far as I'm aware, Solomon's Temple. Mid-American says, I'm a network engineer with a CCNP certification and my BS is in information security. This is my world. We are always a step behind the black hats. We plug a hole, they find a new one, cycle repeats. And let's see here. I think I'm caught up here. Okay, we have to get off the air now, so we're going to wrap it up right now. So this has been the Sean Spicer Breast Briefing post-show. Thank you for enjoying our, watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. But thank you for watching our coverage today. We'll be back tomorrow. If there's a briefing, we'll cover it. We cover all the briefings, pre-show and post-show. If there's more breaking news, we will be on the air with it. Thank you to Jake Seals for producing. Thank you to the moderators for moderating the chat. If you'd like to donate, once again, we are viewer-funded. We rely on you guys to be able to do this for you. So if you'd like to donate, we really appreciate it. rsbn.tv/donate. That's rsbn.tv/donate. If you want to make maybe your monthly donation and get some cool stuff from Right Side in return, check out our Patreon site, www.patreon.com/rsbn. Or you can also, if you're watching us on YouTube, click on the $ at the bottom of the chat room on YouTube. You can donate that way. Follow us on Twitter. At RSB Network is where we are on Twitter. I'm at Lookner. Jake is at Jacob RSBN Music. And subscribe to us on YouTube and click the notifications bell when you subscribe to get all the latest notifications about our videos. Share our videos on Facebook. We really appreciate it if you get a chance. And that's it. So hope you have a great day. We'll see you either for the next briefing or the next breaking news that's happening. But for everybody here at Right Side, I'm Steve Lookner. Have a great day.